ask me if I know Neil.
Nice.
Dude's popular.
Yeah, he knows a lot of people. Benny, what'd you do with those granola bars? What'd you do with those granola bars? Thank you. I hope it's off. Might have a break.
Oh, you're right.
Sorry, could you let people know that once our company's there, everybody can take their seats?
Okay.
That's
They'll probably announce it.
Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program is about to begin. Damas y caballeros, por favor tomen asiento. El programa está a punto de comenzar. Please welcome CPAC Chairman Matt Schlapp and CPAC Senior Fellow Mercedes Viana Schlapp.
Why are you standing?
Buenos
respect.
días. Buenos días.
Thanks for being here, and I want to first of all start off by saying two things. First thing is my wife has done a lot of great work trying to figure out, with President Trump back in office, which has made such a huge difference, trying to figure out exactly what CPAC can do to make the most change the most immediately, because as we all know, we face so many serious problems. So thank you for all this great work you've done with your partners to make sure that we're highlighting these issues, so thank you.
Well, primero, gracias a todos ustedes en estar con nosotros, los que están visitando de México y de otros países de América Latina. Es un honor tenernos a ustedes con nosotros en este tema tan importante de combatir el narcoterrorismo, que impacta a las familias, a las comunidades, a las naciones. Y la única forma que podemos lograr las soluciones y salvar vidas es trabajando juntos y encontrando los aliados que van a ayudar a combatir esta crisis que estamos teniendo en este momento. Primero, quisiera empezar con una oración. We always start with a prayer here at CPAC. It's very important that we center ourselves in God and that we are doing His work. So I'd love to bring onto the stage Pastor Jonathan Avedano. Thank you, Jonathan, for being with us. He held an event for us at CPAC Latino for what was for governor, we would have wanted our governor to win, the Republican governor. Come on over.
Bueno, God bless everybody. Dios les bendiga a todos. It's an honor that we can be here. It's super important. I always tell people that the situation that we see sometimes in our nation is not because that people are not being informed. They're being informed incorrectly. That's why we are here. We are here to stand straight and look forward and to inform our people right. So I'm going to ask if we could bow our heads and let's dedicate this time to the Lord. Almighty God, Judge of nations and defender of the innocent, we stand before you aware that evil does not announce itself as evil. It hides in corruption, profits from addiction, traffics in human lives, and terrorizes communities while calling itself enterprise. Today, we name it for what it is. We ask you to expose what thrives in darkness, to break the grip of criminal power that feeds on violence and fear, and to dismantle every system that rewards lawlessness and destruction. Grant our leaders clarity without confusion, courage without compromise, and authority grounded in truth and justice. Strengthen those who stand on the front lines, law enforcement, security forces, and all who protect life and order. Guard this nation, its people, and its future. May justice not hesitate. May truth not be silenced. May righteousness guide policy, action, and resolve. We ask your blessing over this gathering and over the work that must now be done. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
And can I ask, Myung, you just walked in. Where's Myung? Come on up. Because we have to say the pledge if we're going to say a prayer. Will you say the pledge with us? Come. You're an honorary Latin American today, okay? Is that deal? Here's the
Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. It was a surprise.
At CPAC, we're always making changes at the last minute. It's just the way it is. Thank you, Myung. Thanks for being with us today.
Myung is one of our great partners in South Korea, so it just shows that CPAC is all over the world to fight the communists, to fight the socialists, and to bring freedom to all that we can help around the globe. And I am so honored to introduce a champion, a hero in his country, someone who stands for freedom, someone who is looking to fight for a better Mexico. Let's make Mexico great again. Our dear friend, our partner in this great event, Juan Ivan Peña Neder, come join us on the stage.
Thank you very much, Matt Mercy. Hi. Hi, Mercy. Thank you very much. Really. I have a script because...
I'm gonna let you go, and I'm gonna exit. Take it away.
Matt and Mercy's lab, you are an exemplary couple, deeply committed to the defense of the Christian West and to the restoration of the finest conservative values of the United States. Values that for more than 250 years have strengthened societies across this continent. Few nations have seen as deeply shaped by that inspiration as Mexico. Our Constitution, our separation of powers, our federal system, and even our name, the United Mexican States, are direct heirs of the libertarian vision forged by the founding fathers of this great nation. For that reason, the summit is more than a conference. It's a symbol of urgency. An urgent call to rescue values that today in Mexico and increasingly in the United States are under sustained and coordinated attack. That attack is driven by old enemy of the West, statist socialism. True to this historical pattern, socialism never advances alone. It allies itself with the worst elements of society. Today, it has aligned itself with drug trafficking networks and with hostile foreign interests, seeking to weaken the West and to corrode the moral, political, and economical foundations of our civilization. Justice and liberty, when manipulated in bad faith, are turned into weapons against themselves. That is the battle on which we stand today. For Mexicans, narco-terrorism is not an abstract concept. It is a daily reality. I speak not from theory, but from personal tragedy. Several years ago, the husband of my mother, a retired lawyer, 70 years old, was murdered in broad daylight on a main avenue of the city of Chihuahua, a city of more than 1 million inhabitants. He was killed by a young hitman under the influence of drugs, simply to steal his car. The consequences destroyed my family. My mother, a volunteer with the Society of San Vicente de Paul, an elementary school teacher and a devout Catholic, suffered an emotional collapse that took her life within 2 years. This is what narco-terrorism does. It does not only kill individuals, it annihilates families, communities, and nations. But this is not the first time my family or my country has confronted us in defense of the Republic. More than a century ago, my family in Chihuahua took up arms to defend the Mexican Republic against the French Empire and its Austro-Belgian allies. Mexico itself took refuge in Chihuahua during this struggle. in the frontier region once known as El Paso, Texas, today Ciudad Juárez and El Paso. Even earlier, my great-uncle Joaquin Terrazas personally led the defense of Chihuahua against the violent Apache uprising. He defeated Victorio as a warrior, giving rise on the American side of the border to the defining chapter of the 19th century epic when Victorio's young lieutenant fled north. His name was Geronimo. That tragic history teaches us a simple truth. Order must prevail over chaos if liberty is to endure. Those same Republican values, democracy, free markets, and peace, are the ones we're called to defend today, not with rifles, but with courage, organization, and moral clarity. They are values that give rise to Mexico Republicano and a movement born from the middle classes of northern Mexico, historically aligned with the shared destiny of North America. For this conviction, we have paid a price. We have faced pressure from drug cartels. Our leaders have been kidnapped. Large positions for national structure have been treated and to prevent us from achieving legal party registration. Why? Because our very existence reminds these groups of something they fear. The decent Mexicans are not intimidated, even facing enemies that appear invincible. Before concluding, allow a personal word of gratitude. I thank Mexico Republicano team whose courage made this summit possible. Grisha Raeder, Simón Vargas, Pedro Cobo, Angie, and Joaquin Rodriguez. Your commitment, often carried out under real risk, is a testament to convictions, not treat a kind of silence. I thank my beloved wife, a former senator, and my tireless companion in the struggle. Her integrity, strength, and faith have sustained me in the hardest moments. I'm grateful to my children here today, Emilio and Paola, committed conservatives and Republicans who understand that liberty is not inherited automatically, but defended by each generation. And finally, my son Juan Iván, fully committed with the cause, who had to remain in Mexico due to obligations of service. His absence itself, reminder that the struggle is real and traveled across borders. God bless America, God bless Mexico, God bless our alliance, and God bless Donald Trump, the Vice President of the United States.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
I want to mention something that's really important. I know there's always these conferences and these events. Our goal at CPAC, and as we're going into CPAC USA, which you are all invited to come, we have a huge international presence there in March 25th to the 28th. I know Juan Iván will be there with us as well. The theme is actions, not words. So while we are going to have these conversations on stage, our goal is from here to know what is our call to action. ¿Cuáles son nuestras acciones? No solamente son palabras, pero de verdad, ¿qué hay que hacer en lo que es nuestras acciones para de verdad hacer una diferencia en nuestras comunidades y nuestras naciones? So I think, Juan Iván, we're committed to working together, working with our international partners to tackle this issue of narco-terrorism, to call them out, and to make sure that we do everything we can to put pressure on our decision makers, on our leaders, on our congressional leaders, on our administration to keep going, do more, to be able to break up these cartels, stop the political violence, stop the assassination of innocent people, and help ensure that we can protect families from this evilness, this demonic evilness that we have seen happening because of the drugs that have come into this country and have impacted so many countries. So let's get started. Vamos.
Please welcome the moderator for the Mexico Cartel Capture and State Collapse panel, Frank Russo, CPAC Director of the Center for Combating Human Trafficking.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here, and I'm excited to introduce our panelists, Larry and Raul. They are both integrally involved in the Mexican government's operations here in the United States. Larry, will please come join us. Thank you for being here. Thank you. So I know we have a very busy morning, so we're going to dive right in. And the thesis of today is that the narco-terrorism problem impacts all Americans, but also all of the Mexican citizens that so many that you represent. And I think the challenge we notice, Raul, you serve in the Congress as part of this opposition party, is that this narco-terrorism problem interlinks with issues like human trafficking, like security agreements, But there's also a narrative that we want to dispel, that there are not partners in Mexico that want to be a part of this security success. Can you talk a little bit about your work to strengthen those ties between our two countries to make sure that we can keep our communities safe and yours?
First of all, I want to thank CPAC. I want to thank Mexico Republicano. I want to start introducing myself. As the moderator was saying, I'm the first member of the Mexican Congress voted by Mexicans abroad. That means I represent Mexicans living mainly here in the United States. I live in New York and Mexico City, and it's my second term. I defeated Morena, which is the party of the regime. I defeated Morena in 2021, and I defeated by landslide in 2024. And I started with that because I always push for the change of the narrative of what the Mexicans in the US are. Especially because my dad came to this country from scratch with nothing in his pocket but $100, and he achieved the American dream. And that's how I perceive the US. I love America and I love Mexico. So that's the change of narrative. Most of the Mexicans here are not like the Mexican government is saying that they are against the US or anti-US. We love America and we love Mexico. Out of those 12 million first-generation Mexicans, 8 million out of those 12 are legally in this country. Only 4 million are not. Obviously, we have to talk about those 4, but we have the double that are with legal status. We're not talking about those 8. We're not talking about those second and third generations. All of them, all of us, love America and love Mexico. And that narrative needs to be perceived as an afterthought in Mexico and the US and Canada. Unfortunately, with the Mexican government right now, they're trying to push different in a different way. Against the US administration, against feeling or sentiment of US-Mexico as a whole. And that's one of the main things I'm pushing in Congress, change the ideology. Sometimes in Congress I speak in English because I have to talk to those second and third generations that are raised here in the US and don't speak a perfect Spanish. So that's the idea of what we do as a deputy that represents the migrants. And that's the first part of my intervention, that I would say from Congress, we want to talk about the narrative. From PAN, which is my party, the first position, the first leader of the opposition in Mexico, the first political party, the strongest one, and that's why we want to change. We have to have the voice of the diaspora, of the Mexican diaspora, living in the US, creating jobs, making $2.5 billion US only by Mexicans here, paying taxes. That's the story of success. Just like my dad did, and a lot of parents did, and just like second generations like mine are doing. Thank you.
No, thank you, and I think you've hit on such an important point. Yes. We talked about it a little bit backstage. In order for there to be success on public safety, on fighting these types of crimes that are horrifying to the community, we have to do it together. And I think you have been a bridge builder in a way that we just have not seen from the current regime in Mexico. So we're thankful for your service. Now, Larry, I'm going to bring you to the tougher topic. We talked about it last summer right here, which is fighting that nexus between human trafficking and narco-terrorism. The unfortunate challenges with drug addiction, with trafficking those individuals who get hooked, those challenges of things, this problem being cross-border, unfortunately feels like a 5,000-foot problem, but it's a real one in our communities. And most importantly, it impacts the economic and personal agreements and the human element of what we do between the Mexico and the United States. I'd love for you to talk about how you've experienced that here at home, but also over the border, and how those partnerships can actually strengthen our ability to fight these crimes.
Sure, and thank you. Good morning to all. And I couldn't agree more. First off, thank you, and thank CPAC for hosting this very important forum. Definitely, it impacts our communities. Let me start off. My perspective comes from working in this very important relationship for over 2 decades. Not only cross-border, building ties and bringing business to the U.S. and making sure that our U.S. companies in Mexico are doing well, and that obviously America is well taken care of. And one of the issues that I've always seen, I live in Houston, and Houston is the #1 city with human trafficking. Most people don't realize it. Most people in Houston don't realize it, but it is happening. And drug trafficking and human trafficking are big issues that most don't talk about because, as you said, they're right at a 5,000 feet level. And the issue is it's stemming from a lack of working together with Mexico to resolve these 2 very big issues, drug trafficking and human trafficking. How does that affect us, right? How does it affect just the general population, and how does it affect our different cities? That's a very, very important point, and that's something that President Trump has gotten involved in. And I've seen how his degree of strategic insight into this issue has resolved a number of issues, right? It has been, the drug trafficking issue is being tackled. It's a huge phenomena that's happening not only in Mexico, not only affecting Mexico, but all these cartels and these terrorist networks are coming into our country and are already developed in our country. So how do we stop that from the get-go? How do we work with a reliable partner? And how do we make sure that they're not affecting our communities is the biggest question. And I would dare say that if it wouldn't be for President Trump looking at this particular detail and making sure that there's a focus on it, calling them foreign terrorist organizations, makes a huge difference. And that's where I think our communities will definitely benefit. And we have to do something about it, because it's just a growing problem, and it's already a cancer in both of our countries.
Well, Larry, you're a better moderator than me, because you got ahead of my next question for all, which is, what do we do about it? How do we begin to address this problem? And one of the discussions we also had was around the different levers that our government and your government has to maybe make these security agreements have some teeth, require that partnership. Well, can you talk about maybe some of these treaties or partnerships that could be leveraged to help fight this problem?
Especially in terms of what PAN, or the opposition, is doing in Mexico. We're pushing for a democratic clause. What is a democratic clause on the USMCA side? That if any of the signing parties of the treaty, that means US, Canada, or Mexico, has strong ties, links with organized crime, that treaty should be dissolved. That's one point that we need to focus on the USMCA. There cannot be treaties, there cannot be investment, there cannot be economic strengths within the three countries if there's no legal certainty, if there's no public safety. If you have political leaders, like in Mexico, with huge links, like the Morena party, which is a party of the regime, with the AMLO administration, with different drug cartels, then you cannot invest in different states. There's no legal certainty for companies to soft land in Mexico. And that's one of the biggest things we need to be focusing and talking to different members of Congress here in the US, but also in Mexico, and to the administration. We need a democratic clause that can dissolve the treaty if there's a link between one of the parties, especially in Mexico, and the organized crime. 86% of Mexico is controlled by drug cartels. And that can only happen if there are political leaders involved with them, because they have been financed. All those funds from the drug cartels are being poured into this regime. And we've mentioned it in Mexico in the Congress, and now we want to see it here in Washington, D.C. So that's something we need, a democratic clause, just like the European Union has when they signed their treaties with different countries. That's what we should have in this USMCA review. Thank you.
That makes great sense. I think, and to put a finer point on it, we're talking about an actual trigger that will break agreements if you are not working on a public safety perspective to keep both sets of communities safe. I can't think of a more common sense measure than Congress should be able, in a bipartisan way, get behind. And so I'm grateful that you all have engaged in that effort, and I think you've also hit on an important topic that, Larry, I want to come back to you on, which is the economic factors here. Unfortunately, there are the most important piece, which is the human relationships. There are economic challenges that come from these lack of secure and safe countries, and so in these secure and safe agreements. Can you talk about what that is, and what does that mean for the American taxpayer and the Mexican taxpayer? What are the costs of these crimes?
Definitely, and as the Congressman was saying, this has just huge ramifications. And certainly security, certainly drugs pouring into our country, fentanyl, which is the biggest cause of death of individuals from 18 to 45 years old. But what happens economically, and that's where the impact is for every family in this great country, is enormous, right? Our law enforcement has to focus on the border. Our law enforcement has to stop these criminal networks within our metro areas and within just all of the cities in the country. not even going into detail of what's happening in Mexico, but what's happening in our communities is huge. And the impact is enormous, right? Because at the end of the day, all this costs the taxpayer. And it costs the taxpayer when somebody gets hooked on one of these drugs, so it costs a tremendous amount to the taxpayer. Fighting crime costs the taxpayer. Obviously, the number of homicides is linked many times to these criminal networks, and these criminal networks are operating today in every single part of our country. So that's a fact, and it's economically impacting our communities. Part of the reason of the cost of living, obviously a factor of it, has to do with this security threat that our country, that the United States of America is under this huge strain on our resources. So I do believe that if we are able to tackle even further these narco-terrorist groups, we will be impacting positively our communities in not only better security, but also better economic conditions.
It is the number one issue, if you're here in the United States right now, is cost of living, is those challenges that folks, especially young people, try to move up, like you've talked about, Raul, and that can't happen in a place where public safety is compromised. So I always love to force my guests at this audience to tell us a little about how can they get involved. You are integrally, Raul, touching on not just the United States government, but what the Mexican government is facing challenge-wise. What are some next steps for those out in the audience today, those coming from abroad, but also those here domestically? Where is it lobbying their members of Congress? Is it advocating for these changes in security agreements? What are some of those next steps that make the most sense to addressing this terrorism problem and bringing it into it with a partnership alongside Mexico, not just the United States acting independently, but working together?
First of all, we need to work on the new Merida initiative. We need cooperation. We need collaboration with the United States, Canada, and Mexico. You know, when we call for cooperation and collaboration, some of these voices, extreme leftist voices in Morena and in the regime, call us traitors. They call us traitors because we come to Washington. They call us traitors because we ask for help. I said that in Congress. Make Mexico safe again. We need cooperation from our biggest ally, which is the United States of America. In the US, we have more than 30 million Mexican descendants, but we are also binational. So it's a huge problem for both countries. Obviously, there are some issues going on here in the US that we have to work on. But right now, we need to focus on Mexico. For example, right now, there's going on a political reform in Mexico, what we call Ley Maduro, like the Maduro law. They want to abolish all the institutions in Mexico that go in terms of the electoral roll, just like what happened in the previous election here in the US, right? So what will happen if you don't have political stability? What will happen if you don't have public safety? The drug cartels are going to control everything. We just had a judiciary reform 1 year ago. We had to vote, and they said in Mexico, it's just like in the US where you can vote for your judge. Yeah, okay, in the US you can vote for the judge, but in Mexico, some of those judges have been proved that they have links with the drug cartels. So how is the general society, civil society, going to participate if there's fear, right? Just like President Trump said, unfortunately, the president of Mexico is frightened of the drug cartels. So we have to call for cooperation to strengthen the civil society coming from Mexico here to speak in Congress. That's what we need to push forward with the USMCA, with different organizations, US-Mexico Chamber of Commerce. We need to talk about these new ideas, bringing more students to the US. In the past, you had more Mexicans coming here to study in the US and have an American mindset, just like me. And you had more Americans going to Mexico to understand Mexico, not only Cancun and Tijuana, right? So that's what we need to go to focus. The next 30 years of the new generations to think with a NAFTA mindset. And that's what we need to start thinking about.
And I did not tell him that my wife and I had our honeymoon in Cancun, but it is a beautiful part of the country, as is so many others. Larry, I'll have you kind of lead us out here, which is you have lived both sides of this border, but you also understand the challenges of even our communities, the conservative communities, understand the value and importance of the partnership with Mexico and leaders like Raul. Can you speak about how we break down the barriers and what the work you have done throughout your career to strengthen those ties? Because it does lead to not only making Mexico safe again, but making America safe again.
Exactly, and thank you. I do believe that we need a very strong partnership. The way President Trump has managed this relationship, I think, has been extraordinary. We definitely, the U.S. cannot do it alone, right? It needs Mexico to cooperate and cooperate fully. But it also needs, there needs to be guardrails, and there also needs to be very clear metrics where we're getting the results that we need. Fortunately, immigration is controlled, but the security aspect and the terms in terms of both human trafficking and drug trafficking are enormous, and they will continue because there's a demand from our side. But we need to make sure that from the Capitol and from Washington, D.C., the focus is on not only trade, which is now almost $1 trillion, our largest trading partner is Mexico, but we need to secure our border in a sense of making sure that there's no drugs coming into, or the least amount of drugs coming into the country, and human trafficking to the minimum. How do we do that? We need reliable partners. We need to work with everyone south of the border that wants to work with us. Not everyone wants to work with us because obviously there's politicians that are compromised, and these enterprises are $40 billion enterprises, these drug cartels. So they're huge. They have enough money to buy a lot of people in both countries, right? So we have to make sure we're vigilant and that we're doing something about it. And I think it begins here at the Capitol, right? It begins with our Congress, making sure that they're focusing on this as a top priority because it's not only economic, but it's social, right? And it's taking care of the people. So for me, there's not a more important job than making sure that Congress is pushing in the right direction, is working with the administration, that it's not tied to if you're a Democrat or you're a Republican. This is for every single American, right? And every single American has to understand that there's no more important priority than the security of our kids, security of our communities, right? And keeping drugs out of our schools, keeping drugs out of our streets. And that's just huge. It's a cancer. It's a cancer that's hitting not only my hometown, not only hitting Houston and the greater area, but hitting every single part. And human trafficking is embedded in that. So there's human trafficking, drug trafficking, couldn't be worse, right? And we're not seeing it because maybe you're not involved in drugs or you're not involved in human trafficking, but it is happening today in every single town and city in this country. So we need to make sure that Congress is fully focused on it and working with the administration.
Well, I can't thank you both enough, and I really would say they have stepped up into public service, Larry, Raul, for doing that. It takes a lot of courage, especially in a fight against this $40 billion industry. But the thing I will leave all of you today is that we are in this fight together. There's more of us than I think the enemy realizes. And because of folks like you, we have a chance to win this fight. So thank you for being here, and thank you all for joining CPAC today.
Please welcome back CPAC Senior Fellow Mercedes Viana Schlapp and Juan Ivan Peña Neder, President of the National Executive Committee of México Republicano.
Oye, no hay aplauso. What's wrong with you guys? Come on, it's early. Did you have your coffee yet? Como mis hijas. I have 5 daughters, okay? So actually my oldest is here somewhere. I think she might be in the back. She works with Sarah Carter, who will be joining us shortly, our drug czar, incredible drug czar. Pero yo tengo 5 hijas. You were mentioning about your 2 kids, and my mother, they would call her, it's abuela, right? Because she's actually born in Spain but grew up in Cuba. And they would call her Lela. And then abuela would make, my girls started drinking coffee ever since they were super little. So they would say, no café con leche, café con Lela, is what they would say. So they've been drinking café con Lela their whole lives, okay? Which is, you know, as you all know, in our case, café cubano, an espresso with milk. So make sure you get your coffee while you're here. Okay, I wanted to bring Juan Ivan back on stage because really I think this is a critical moment to talk about why we have this partnership with Mexico Republica. We had the great honor of doing work at CPAC Mexico for several years and fell in love with the country. It's a very special place. And I always felt that not only was it a special place, but that, and the people are so beautiful, but that for America, we need a strong Mexico so that America can stay strong, and we need a strong America so that Mexico can become strong. And it made me almost sick to my stomach that Mexico has fallen so far to the left. That, as the previous panelists mentioned, where you have the current government pretty much afraid of the drug cartels and taking on the drug cartels. And then here in America, you have President Trump, who has taken these drug cartels and put them on the terrorist organization list. So it's such a difference. So when Juan Ivan came to us and said, I think this is an important issue for us to address here in Washington, what made you think, let's do this? Let's do this now with CPAC.
Yes, for us it's not only important, it's also a demonstration of the middle class, and many Mexicans don't believe the Morena government is the only option. Perhaps in the numbers you see a giant, but in the reality Morena has not the enough possibility to continue if they don't understand our neighborhood with the United States and still continue to provide the cartels positions very complex, because if you live in Mexico, you know perhaps 500 mayors are members of Morena and very close to the cartels, perhaps members also of the cartels. And those reality on the ground, you can see, you can perceive this control of those organizations, and it's a very complex control because, as an example, you must pay taxes for government, but also you must pay taxes for the cartels, and that provides a huge structure. And the resistance is only not in the mass media, not necessarily in the political parties, but it's only in the social society. You can see here Carlos Alarraqui and Beatriz Pajes, and people who are leaderships who are giving a combat since YouTube. You know, they have thousands and millions of followers, and this is the expression of a society who needs help urgent, because Mexico is a great nation with a very bad government.
So I got to ask you this, because Juan Ivan, aren't you all are taking this lead in really moving forward with Mexico República, trying to get it to the point that you become a political party, Republicano, I'm sorry, Republicano, trying to become a, yes, we're Republicans, but I think that the key is that, are you afraid for your life?
Yes, but as you know, you don't have.
I mean, you're speaking up against the terrorists.
Our leadership in Michoacán, perhaps 3 months ago, was kidnapped by the cartels. He's a
wait, the who?
Our leadership in Michoacán,
leaders, yeah.
Julio Guajardo, his brother was former Secretary of Economy. He was took by the cartels and kidnapped for, I don't know, perhaps 10 hours, and they tell a very specific situation. If México Republicano still continue creating a structure in Michoacán, you will die. And we know who are you, and we know your influence, but Michoacán is a land of cartels. And this repeat along all the country, and to create a political party in the right wing, just with social society, is not possible in Mexico if you don't have support and vision international. Because in Mexico, in our assemblies, they destroy the organization, they put under a high pressure. As an example, former governor of Tamaulipas, Cabeza Vaca, can tell you these expressions are very complex in their state, but not only in Tamaulipas, all the country is under the control of this organization.
So
it's a terrible situation.
So we're talking paying taxes to the narcos, okay? Chances of getting held hostage or kidnapped by the narcos. And then how do the people in Mexico, how do they deal with this problem? I mean, do they feel defeated? Do they feel like the cartels just have way too much power, there's no way of defeating them?
I tell you an example. Perhaps 2 months ago, we were in the border of Tamaulipas, in Matamoros, and the men who sells hot dogs tell us, Simon was there, tell us they ask for 200 pesos daily to the cartels. But not only that, they arrive and say, give me all the hot dogs, and he must, in a month he closed their business, and many businesses are closing because they can't pay the real tax, because in many places in Mexico, the government permit this and doesn't pay tax for government and pay for the cartels. And also it's a problem because the possibilities to take money from legal money from people are reduced to the government. And now you create a dependence. And how can you make anything in Mexico? In the first place, we must understand leave our own risk. This is true. If you want to make politics in Mexico, you must be not brave, but just with enough strong to understand that. If you don't understand, tomorrow, like Carlos Manso, a very brave mayor in Michoacán, was killed, and he asked for the president of the republic for an escort. They sent 14 members of the National Guard, and the Carter killed with a hitman of 16 years.
Right.
It's incredible. His wife will come here, and I don't know why.
¿Cuál es su mensaje para la presidenta Sheinbaum?
Excuse me, Mercy.
¿Cuál es su mensaje?
We need President Sheinbaum break with the past, stop the relationship with the administration heritage from López Obrador, and create a new moment for Mexico. If she don't do it, if she don't understand she is the first woman who commands Mexico, and many Mexicans have a preference for her, and this opportunity is not utilized, Mexico will be destroyed very soon.
So what is the opinion of what do the Mexican people, what do they think about President Trump and what he's doing in his fight against the narco-terrorists?
With different emphasis, because you know, in the south of Mexico and in the Mexico City, still exists a culture against the United States, not only against Trump, but against the United States. But in the north of the country, in the Bajío zone, I have a poll of the 74% of the border Mexicans wants intervention of Mexico. I don't say it's a right supposition or is the right solution, but the people in Mexico needs help from outside because they know their institutions cannot provide this kind of help.
Now, in addition to the narco-terrorist part, and this is something that the former panelists talked about, there are the economic realities, right? So the narcos are making a lot of money off the drugs. It ends up with people getting killed in the process. They're bringing the drugs, at least it has definitely slowed down since President Trump has been in power, but through the border. Where does this end up from an economic standpoint? If you are able to defeat the narco-terrorists, what does that mean economically for Mexico?
In words of the Morena speaker in Mexico City, she says we cannot stop the cartels because they provide a huge number of employees. I think you must understand this is a difficult situation because really in Mexico you have perhaps, I don't know, the 30% of the economy is under cartels' control.
30% of the economy
in a
is
very
under
legal situation, you know,
right.
they buy enterprises and they say, oh, this is a restaurant with 2,000 people a month and just 2 people because they are cleaning money. But everyone in Mexico knows that, I told you. And we need to create a new impulse to the rights economy, but in Mexico you need impulse the tradition of work of the middle class. You need to stop giving money in huge quantities, more than 15 million of persons, if people receive the right help for government. And this destroys the possibility of a political organization because they are employees of the government. And Mexico debt is increased perhaps, I don't remember exactly, but perhaps 10 times in the Morena's government than immediately before government. And this is incredible because they take huge quantities of money from the public budget and uses to sustaining the power, and they don't think in the future, in the immediate future. Right. Perhaps in Mexico will be broke in a month, right? The economical situation is in a huge crisis.
So tienen el problema económico, tienen el problema de los narcotraficantes, de trata de personas también tienen un problema muy grande. Y entonces, pero el Partido Morena está en control totalmente en lo que es en esta situación. Entonces, ¿cómo se puede unir esta coalición en la parte, lo que es México republicano? ¿Cómo se puede crear esta coalición para poder lograr victoria en las elecciones?
Mercy, necesitamos mucha orientación y apoyo de tu parte. Por primera vez aquí hay representantes del PRI y del PAN, que son la oposición tradicional al régimen morenista. Yo he platicado personalmente con sus altas dirigencias y con la sociedad civil y los medios de comunicación realmente libres, porque gran parte de los medios están controlados por el gobierno, porque necesitamos primero generar voces que digan estamos opuestos. Y luego en la masa...
Porque eso no lo estamos casi escuchando en este momento.
No, están muy divididos, el PAN ha tomado decisiones de separarse del PRI en una coalición, están buscando sus aspectos políticos específicos, pero México Republicano ha logrado junto con CPAC atraer a este summit a voces que pueden generar una nueva alianza que enfrenten esta situación. Y lo digo con sinceridad, muchas de las iglesias evangélicas, muchos miembros de la Iglesia Católica están involucrados socialmente porque están hartos del narcoestado y no tienen posibilidad de expresión política porque Morena compra el número de votos suficientes para ganar distrito a distrito.
Sí.
Entonces, a pesar de que votó contra Morena 46% de la población, tienen el 74% de la Cámara. Entonces es una falsa imagen de fuerza, pero con estos controles, con 500 alcaldes del narco, es muy difícil vencer esta situación.
Te voy a decir en Polonia, por ejemplo, que era un milagro tratar de ganar esas elecciones en Polonia. Cuando fuimos, el presidente ahora que es presidente, el partido nos llamó y dijo, trae CPAC a Polonia para ganar estas elecciones. Él estaba por 3 puntos debajo, ¿no? Llegamos allá a CPAC con nuestros aliados otra república, pero de Polonia, y cuando hicimos CPAC, unimos la coalición y ganamos las elecciones en Polonia. Y eso porque, te digo acá, como Mateo y yo hemos tenido décadas en lo que es el grassroots y la política, la importancia de unirse. Hay que dejar lo que son la competición, las peleas del pasado, porque eso es lo que quieren. Los izquierdistas quieren que nosotros estemos divididos. Y al final hay que estar unidos en la misión para la libertad, para tener un cambio real en México. Y eso es la única manera que podemos ganar. Yo siempre, cuando vienen muchos de nuestros amigos mexicanos, siempre dicen, yo me reúno con un senador o la otra senadora y todos quieren correr para presidente. Te digo honestamente, como hermana de ustedes, escogen a una persona, únense con esa persona para ganar. Eso es lo principal. Porque al final todo el mundo quiere correr, pero tenemos que tener un candidato que de verdad puede ganar las elecciones. Yo creo que eso es un mensaje muy humilde de lo que yo estoy viendo en la parte de afuera, de acá en los Estados Unidos, que en México es unir las coaliciones, tener las personas, los diferentes partidos, porque es la única manera, yo creo, que pueden ganar. Pero bueno, yo no soy mexicana, pero eso... I'm an honorary Mexican.
Lo que México necesita urgentemente es una visión de unidad para decir hay posibilidades y sobre todo una organización como CPAC, que nosotros estaríamos muy honrados de poder organizar CPAC en Monterrey, en México. Me parece que hay condiciones para eso.
¿Quién van a ir del grupo a Monterrey, México? Okay.
Nosotros podríamos generar las condiciones para que haya conversaciones reales, porque no estamos poniendo énfasis en que alguno de nosotros quiera ser candidato o definir posiciones. Lo que queremos es salvar a México del narcocomunismo y creo que lo que podemos hacer es propiciar muy junto a ustedes un diálogo que dé esas garantías.
Right. Ok, estás viendo ahora, tenemos los planes. En este momento hay que unirse en lo que son los planes para poder ganar estas elecciones, tener un mensaje no solamente de combatir el narcoterrorismo, pero la economía. ¿Cómo podemos levantar al pueblo mexicano? That's the key. How are we going to uplift the Mexican people in terms of providing the right economic opportunities and not having to depend on the narco-terrorists for making a living? So, mil gracias. Thank you so much, and we'll go to our next panel.
Thank you very much.
There we go. Okay, is that better? You know, a lot of things in Congress don't work. Sometimes it's the microphone. I think most members of Congress would be upset when their microphone isn't working. So we have a lot of great elected officials with us here today, and I'm excited to introduce our first member of Congress because she is energetic, active, very conservative. She has an A rating with CPAC for all of her votes in Congress. She represents a district in the all-important state of Florida. She's unafraid to speak truth, including last night when she was roasting members of the media at the press club. She's a leader on technology in the Technology Caucus. And as we know, the whole question of the border and people's access to the people of America, technology is a big part of that. So we are honored to have with us today a great conservative champion, Kat Cammack. Come on out, Congresswoman. I could have said so many other nice things,
I was distracted by your wife in the back.
I'm often distracted by my wife, which is why we have 5 children. So come on
As
out
you
here.
should be. It's good to see you, sir. All right, we're coming in hot this morning. Coming in hot like Pete Hegseth on a quote-unquote fishing boat. Oh, come on. One fan right there. Let's go. Well, it is wonderful to be with you all this morning. Thank you so much to our friends at CPAC for hosting a fabulous event. This is an incredible, incredible moment and incredibly important for us to be putting front and center as we redirect our focus to our backyard. Now, as was mentioned, I chair the Republican Women's Caucus as well as the Emerging Tech Task Force here in the People's House. And I know you're going to hear from some fabulous people on some of the events that have happened here recently, a look ahead. But what I want to talk to you about are 2 things. The trafficking element, particularly as it relates to children and the challenge that we face there, and tech and social media and the role that they are playing in the scourge that we know as narco-trafficking. So in the last 5 years, I've spent many, many, many days down at the southern border. In fact, I was working shifts overnight with many of our Border Patrol agents, really learning the tactics that the cartels were employing as they were trafficking millions and millions of people across the border. Now, I know that a few of you know what this is, but this jar is filled with wristbands. Wristbands that these individuals are forced to wear by the cartels. When you go down to the border, you can literally scoop them up by the handful. And this is just a very small sampling. Imagine thousands and well, millions of them all over the place. Every single wristband has a number, a color, and other insignia on it, which tells you which cartel that person belonged to, have they paid, and what number they are for the day. Now, I encourage you guys to come up at some point and look at this closer, because this is really, in a nutshell, or in a jar, what the cartels think of individual human beings. They treat them like cattle. Just a number, they're moving along. Now, this is big business. The moving and trafficking of individuals, as we know, is massive, multi-billion-dollar business. At one point in time, the cartels individually were raking in $1.2 billion, $1.2 billion a month, just on the trafficking of humans. And of course, we know that depending on where you were coming from, the prices varied. This was a very sophisticated and continues to be a sophisticated operation. For example, if you're coming from Mexico and you wanted to get to San Antonio, not only would this be mapped out for you, but you would pay online, not in cash, online, and it would be a geo-targeted, geo-fenced ad that you would receive through your social media platform. But that was about $6,500 to $7,500. If you were coming from further south, Central, or South America, the price went up. At one point in time, I was actually seeing the ads that were being run and the conversations that were being had coming up from Nicaragua or Panama. That was about $9,500. But if you were coming from mainland China, it was about $75,000. Now you have to ask yourself, for an individual who has a piss-poor credit score, because we know in China that they have a citizen scoring system, if you are not a good citizen of the CCP, then you are not going to be particularly wealthy, we'll say. So you have to ask yourself, where does someone get $75,000? And the second question is, how do they leave the country? We know for a fact that the Chinese government has been complicit in allowing for factories and movement of people and the precursors for the drugs to the United States with the cartels as their partner in crime. Now, of course, these individuals coming from mainland China have 2 purposes. Either they genuinely are trying to get out of China, or they're agents of the state. We know that to be true. If they cannot afford to pay, they get to the United States and then they work it off. As is the case with so many of the hundreds of thousands of children that were sent across the border unaccompanied. 340,000 is what HHS has said that they accounted for. But what is even more disturbing to me is that HHS cannot account for those 340,000 today. See, when you cross the border as an unaccompanied minor, the system works where you come in, and thanks to the Biden administration, they did away with DNA testing. And if you, as an individual, an adult over 18, had an unaccompanied child, a minor, and at the time it was 6 years old as the age, you got a free pass into the United States. And they didn't check to see if you were the biological parent. What was worse is that the Biden administration, they advertised that they were doing away with the DNA testing. They were more concerned with the quote-unquote civil rights of illegals coming into the United States than they were with the actual rights of American citizens. There's a lot of people out here shaking their heads. I know, it just makes your skin crawl, like you want to just go punch somebody. I may have. But this, to me, is nuts that we have seen all of this happening. The system in place is, okay, so you then get into the Donna processing facility. I'm just going to use McAllen as an example. You get into the Donna processing facility, and then you go through the process of getting paroled into the United States. Back in the day, we used to call that catch and release. But in the infinite wisdom of the Biden administration, they said, we're not doing catch and release. We are paroling people into the United States. I know this because, again, I have been to the border countless times, and I would sit on the airplane with people with manila envelopes that on the front said, I don't speak English, please help me. And on one particular flight, I sat next to a lady, and I said, can I see what's in your envelope? And she pulls out, it was a Visa gift card, courtesy of the American taxpayer. I said, where are you going? She was going to Chicago. And she said, I have a sponsor there. Now, the word she used wasn't sponsor, but you can kind of read between the lines of what was happening here. I was able to track down, through our work on the Homeland Security Committee, that the funds that were being used to purchase bus tickets, plane tickets, gift cards, etc., was being funneled through NGOs like Catholic Charities. And the pot of money that they were pulling it out of came from emergency housing assistance, designed for people who have just experienced natural disasters or veterans in crisis. I just want to put a point on that. The United States government under the Biden administration took money from homeless veterans and American citizens who were in crisis after a natural disaster, sent it to Catholic Charities, and the Catholic Charities gave it to non-citizens. Now let's go back to what's happening with these kids. 340,000 unaccompanied minors that get into the Donna processing facility. They're underage, they're by themselves. I won't even go into the stories of what I have heard and seen from these children who've been horrifically abused. And now as a mom with a 5.5-month-old, I don't think that I would have been able to maintain composure had I been hearing those stories then as I am now. These children, after experiencing horrific abuse throughout their entire journey to the border, many of them being used as recycling. And by recycling, that means you accompany, they would get matched up with an adult who's trying to get across the border. And then once they got to the border, then they would get into the United States and then be sent back, and they would make the journey again, because their whole role was basically to be a Sherpa for these adults, these illegals, these criminals, many of them sex offenders, gang members, people with horrific violent records. And these children were being used, some as young as 3, to do this journey over and over and over again. But for the ones that weren't being recycled, they went into the custody of HHS. And HHS had 72 hours to process these children. Now, I have stood in the processing facility amongst countless filing cabinets, each one of them with a file on these kids, with the pictures of their arms that had Sharpie on them that was the phone number, or the piece of paper that was pinned to their chest with a phone number that they're supposed to call when they get to America, because that phone number supposedly belongs to their tia, or their tío, or, whatever. Nobody apparently thought that it was unusual that that same phone number popped up hundreds of times. I don't know about you, but I got like 3 aunts, not 300. Nobody put 2 and 2 together like, this is unusual. This one lady has so many nieces and nephews. Nobody thought to question it. In fact, when they went and did the quality assurance checks, the spot checks, many of them reported that the addresses were empty parking lots. That is a blatant, abject failure of the United States government under Joe Biden's watch. Now, my goal here is not to depress the hell out of the room. I'm really not trying to do it. I'm just trying to paint a picture of how big, absolutely catastrophic, the handling of the situation was under the Biden administration, which brings us to the massive undertaking that President Trump and his administration has to undertake to fix this mess. Every single one of these people that is represented with these wristbands here today is somewhere in this country. Don't know where, we don't know what their intentions are. Many of them are children, and many of them are being trafficked. So my ask and my plea of you all here today is, please don't forget those kids. Many of them had no choice in coming here. They had no choice in being used as Sherpas to get criminals across the border. They were used. And I think we have a responsibility to clean up the mess that was made by President Trump's predecessor. But I touched on a little bit the role of social media in this massive, massive narco-terrorism network. See, call me a glutton for punishment, but every morning I wake up and I go on my phone and I pull up, pick your social media up, I'll say Facebook today. Go into the marketplace, type in Cruzando la Frontera, and you will find advertisements from different cartels and fronts for cartels where they say, we can get you from Mexico City to San Antonio, $9,500. Blatantly, they're saying this. In fact, this morning, I'm going to pull it up. Took a screenshot of it. I'm in a bunch of these groups, like, obviously not as, hey, I'm Kat Kamak, right? You'll never know the name I'm under. But I'm in this group, and it says, Cruz Recto y Seguro a Texas, and the phone number. This was posted 19 hours ago. Don't think that this isn't still happening, right? And then what's worse, I mean, this is kind of what's so crazy, it's so in our face, it's blatant. You go into the comments, and you can find the people who are commenting and asking and pinging, and then you literally can go to their Facebook pages. And some of these cartel guys, I mean, don't get me wrong, there is a very incredibly sophisticated network that operates at high levels, but they're like rank and file guys, they're not that bright. Like, they're posting on their social media the stuff that they do with the cartels. I'm like, he's a narco trafficker, right? Like, don't pose with a kilo. But it's crazy that it's this blatant. And so when I talk to the social media companies, I send very strongly worded letters, right? But I bring them in, more importantly, and I say, what are you guys doing to combat this? Because not only are they advertising on your platform, but then they're using mechanisms in your platform to facilitate the transaction. They're paying. And you know what the stance of the social media companies has been? We have a policy to protect human rights, so we're not going to take those down. The social media companies have been complicit in the narco-trafficking global network from day one, and they do it under the guise of human rights. Yet they don't give a damn about the hundreds of thousands of children who have been abused, the women who have been brutalized and raped. They don't care about them. When you start asking questions, you realize that when it comes to tech, many are more worried about the bottom line. And because they have allowed the facilitation of this to occur on their platforms and the flow of money to go through their platforms, you start to understand that it is about the bottom line. And so as we're thinking about this, as we're talking about this, it's not just about China and a foreign adversary that is looking to undermine the United States by any means necessary. It is not about all of these elements. It is that, but it is so much more. And we, as advocates for these people who have been forced to wear these bans, who have experienced horrific, horrific crimes, we need to make sure that we're looking at this in totality, which includes the tactics of social media and how they're being utilized. We have a responsibility to hold these companies accountable, and I cannot thank you enough for being engaged on this issue. So again, thank you to CPAC for hosting an incredible event. I am so honored to be with you this morning. God, take care, God bless, and may God continue to bless these United States. Thank you.
Please welcome CPAC Chairman Matt Schlapp in conversation with Senator Bill Hagerty of Tennessee.
You guys are popular. You're getting all the best people. Thanks for being with us. I call him ambassador because he was ambassador to Japan. I think it's a cooler title than senator, but that's
I'll take it, man.
You have a little bit of a resume where you have done a lot of amazing things, including being a businessman. Like, you're not a professional politician. You come from the world of business, and that gives you a very unique perspective on all these challenges we're seeing in the country.
Indeed it does, and I think, look no further than the occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue right now. Yeah, that's right. I was on the phone with him yesterday on a number of things, but we got into an issue. He said, I have some experience in that area. And I said, I do know you have some experience in that area. That's why the American public want to see somebody that can come in and actually fix things and get things done. And that's the business perspective. You can't lollygag around. Time is money, as they say. It's true. And finding the most effective and efficient way to deliver an outcome is absolutely critical to success in business. And to see that manifest itself in the federal government is refreshing, I think, to most of us.
So we have this whole question about how drugs are destroying our country, right? We have a lot of focus on MAHA and prescription drugs, and then an overdependence on prescription drugs, and then we have all this question about these illicit drugs and everything else that's coming through the border. Now, Donald Trump, and we're going to have Sarah Carter with us today, done a great job of closing the border, which was the first, most urgent step. But it's much more complicated than that. You were the ambassador to Japan, as I bring up. What is China trying to do to, destroy our kids?
So, Matt, when I got to Tokyo, as any business person would do, I got there in 2017 as ambassador. I went through the entire embassy organization. If you think about it, Japan is the third largest economy in the world at that point in time. It is a large embassy. Number of different agencies are there, but...
Can I just ask you one question? This always shocks me. How many State Department personnel were in that embassy? Do you remember?
The total complement of people I had that were under my domain were about 1,200 people, but that included...
1,200 people, did you hear that? That's a lot of people.
But also, there were a number of different agencies and departments that are not State Department. So I had a big team from Department of Energy, Department of Agriculture. But here's one that I had, Drug Enforcement Agency. Now, Japan doesn't have a drug problem. Why do we have DEA officers here? You know why, Matt? I brought everybody in to do a review right as I got there. They were there to monitor transshipments that take place when Chinese send in fentanyl precursors and other drugs to Japan, then to mask them, put them onto a Japanese carrier to move them into the United States to kill us, or to send them on to Mexico where they're manufactured. So the Chinese have been doing this, shipping the componentry for these illicit drugs for some time. It's moving. I was literally on the phone with Larry Kudlow when President Trump was talking with Xi Jinping in Buenos Aires at the G20. This is 2018. And President Trump said to Xi, you will stop sending fentanyl into the United States. And she agreed to that. She did not agree to stop sending precursors. He did not agree to stop sending it to Mexico. He did not agree to stop partnering with the cartels. And what they did from that point is continue to ramp this up and wage war on our country. And just in my home state, Matt, we lose 3,000 young people a year to drug overdose. Most of it is fentanyl, and almost everything has fentanyl in it. It has been devastating. It doesn't get enough attention. Thank you for bringing the spotlight on this.
One of the things we said, Ambassador Senator, is what CPAC's trying to do is we can't keep up with President Trump and all the changes. He's a marvel, as you know, because you work for him. But as he's moving so fast, the rest of us have to keep up. And the team around him has to keep up. And so what a group like CPAC is trying to do is facilitate conversations like this, because there's so many people. If I could have a show of hands, how many people have had a loved one or a friend overdose? I mean, it's epidemic. People on our board have had this has happened to their children. It's everywhere. So go back to the thing you said, the precursors, which are being developed in China, to the drugs that are, these illicit drugs that are hitting the street here. How do we stop that?
Well, I think President Trump has taken the first major step, and that is to secure our southern border. A lot of people were complaining, though, about the aggressive steps that President Trump took toward Canada. And the Canadian ambassador, I think, was very clever. She focused on a number of interdictions that took place at the Canadian border, single digits. Some of my colleagues fell for this and said, oh, President Trump has overreached. We shouldn't be putting any sort of penalty or pressure on Canada. They're not responsible for this. Look at the interdictions. Matt, I don't know about you. I've taken my kids up to fish in Canada. You go to the designated street and cross there. I could have crossed anywhere. They don't protect that border. And you know what we found out? Our intelligence sources tell us that there are 30,000 cartel operators in Canada right now making illicit drugs and pumping them across the border, killing our kids. I'm not talking about interdiction. I'm talking about what's going into the blood veins, into the systems of our children. President Trump had every right to do that. The Canadians need to get on board as well. They've got a problem with fentanyl. We've got their problem with fentanyl too. And so I just want to put this into perspective. When pearl clutching was going on here about how could you put pressure on Canada, there's a very real reason for doing it. It's because they don't maintain their own sovereignty. When the USMCA was signed, they brought visa requirements for Mexico. The cartels were able to freely fly their people from Mexico into Canada and go into operation there. They're smart. They're business people at the end of the day, and they're doing this to kill our kids.
We have taken CPAC all over the world. The first country we were in was Japan. Bill Hagerty was the first U.S. ambassador to invite us over. and have an official meeting. It's a very important relationship. Now you're a senator. I know you've got to get over there to preside over the body, but you got to let me ask you a couple of Senate questions. Most of us look at the Senate and say, what are they doing? What's going on? You're one of the hard chargers. You have a great record with CPAC. You're pushing the Trump agenda, but you're in this entity that was almost designed not to do stuff. How do you handle it?
Well, as they say, the Senate is supposed to be the world's greatest deliberative body. We're doing a lot of deliberation. Right. But let me tell you what's happened. There's been a weaponization of procedure over there, way beyond anything the founders ever intended. And if I could take a few minutes and share some numbers with you, Matt, it'll make the point. One of the responsibilities of the United States Senate is called advice and consent for the president's appointees. And the president has to appoint, what's the number, Matt? Over 1,500 appointments that have to have Senate confirmation. Normally, and I say normally going back to Bill Clinton's time, the president is granted great deference, and the people that he nominates or she nominates, if that were to be the case, get through. In Bill Clinton's day, 98% of people that Clinton nominated were immediately moved through the Senate, processed, and confirmed. 2% received something called cloture. I didn't know what cloture was when I got a phone call in 2017 saying, sir, cloture has been invoked on you.
You're like, that must be bad.
It sounded bad, and
it's
turns
good.
out it was. Yeah. Cloture is a 30-hour process. During this period, no other business can be conducted on the floor of the U.S. Senate except the debate on a particularly controversial topic, which in this case was Bill Hagerty for U.S. Ambassador to Japan. During those 30 hours, Matt, do you know how many U.S. senators came to the floor to debate my candidacy for ambassador? 0. What did it do? I was in the wave of the first 4 ambassadors to go through, so I was early. They still delayed me 4 months getting to my post. 3 or 4 months later, ambassadors are being delayed now over a year because they invoked this cloture requirement on 53% of President Trump's nominees in Trump 1. Today, last year in Trump 2, do you know how many of Trump's nominees had cloture invoked on them? 100%. Chuck Schumer held every single nominee, forcing us to wait and hold and process because they're trying to destroy our ability to get anything done. That's the Democrat strategy.
Now, there's some people like Mike Lee and others who are saying, some of you, do you remember Mr. Smith Goes to Washington? This is a really old black and white movie. When senators wanted to slow something down, they had to have a filibuster, which is an internal Senate regulation. And in the old days, the filibuster meant that when you got the microphone, you couldn't stop talking. And when you stopped talking, the filibuster ended unless you could pass it off to your colleague. And then over time, as the Senate got older and older and older, they allowed them to have kind of like a fake filibuster. It's almost like you say there's a filibuster, but you're all at the bar. Not you, but they're all like hanging out someplace and not really doing a filibuster. Do you like this idea of bringing back a real filibuster?
I love the idea.
It would help you young guys over the old guys, I know for sure.
President Trump actually sent out a clip of that famous Jimmy Stewart scene just yesterday afternoon.
We did?
Oh, yeah.
See, I think like him. Why aren't I as rich as him? Because I think like him.
Yeah, he sent it out just yesterday, and I watched it remembering it. It had been a long time since I'd seen that movie, black and white, Jimmy Stewart. I would encourage you to look up that scene, or just go to Truth Social. You'll see it. It was posted yesterday by the president. But I think that would bring an end to some of this ridiculous weaponization of procedure to stop the operation of the Senate.
Well, I just want to thank you for being with us today. I know you got to go preside. You're a great friend and ally to the conservative cause, which, just so you know, from my point of view, isn't really the conservative cause anymore. It's just the American cause. It's about freedom. It's about standing up for these principles. You do that every day, and we appreciate it.
Thank you for everything you do, Matt, your leadership, and everything the CPAC does to perpetuate our freedom.
Yeah, of course. Hi, how are you? I haven't got to see you since you even won. This is great.
I know, I've been like all over like a I feel like, it's like, I wish I could say I spend a lot of time in DC or at home, but I don't. Actually like traveling at the airport is like where the most time I on the floor for two days.
Please welcome the moderator for this fireside chat, CPAC Senior Fellow Mercedes Schlapp, in conversation with Congresswoman Ana Paulina Luna of Florida.
Okay, how are we doing so far? ¿Todo bien? Perfecto. I am so excited to have our next guest with us. She is such a champion. Congresswoman Ana Paulina Luna, representing the 13th District of Florida. on the member of the House Oversight Committee, which you do a lot of work in that area, but a forceful advocate for basically taking down these Mexican cartels, moving that forward to foreign terrorist organizations, a lot of work in that space. So it's really an honor to have you here because you've really been a champion for helping Americans and, and the Western Hemisphere combat this issue. How did you get involved in this issue?
Yeah, so before I actually ran for office, I think when I met you back in 2018, I had worked with Turning Point USA and Charlie Kirk had actually recruited me, but I was already in the activist space as a counter trafficker. And so at the time, I was covering what was happening with crimes against children across the US-Mexico border. But narco-terrorism and sex trafficking do go hand in hand. We know that these are both multi-billion-dollar industries. And it's so crazy to me because when you talk to a lot of young people, especially the TikTokers, Gen Z, et cetera, they're always talking about, oh, well, we want to go to Tulum, or we want to go to all these places in Mexico. But they're not seeing that if you even go a little bit outside a lot of these tourist destinations, if you follow what happened in the Mexican election cycles, some of the bloodiest in U.S. history. And that's a country that could be such a great partner and ally with the United States, but because of what's happening with the destabilization within its own government, because of narco-terrorism, unfortunately, it's not. And so I think that President Trump's national security strategy, as you know, has been very focused on what's happening in the western and southern part of our hemisphere. And I look forward to completely backing his efforts. I think Marco Rubio, shout out to him. He's doing an incredible job as Secretary of State, but it also takes working hand in hand with members of Congress as well.
But that brings up a very good point. I think you saw under Joe Biden, we call him Sleepy Joe around here. Joe Biden did nothing, really nothing, to strengthen the Western Hemisphere. And so I've been, I worked for President Trump in the White House the first term, and I've been very impressed with the fact that there has been a priority to hone in on basically disrupting the supply chain of the drugs coming into the United States, putting a lot of pressure on these drug cartels, they were just coming through our border, pouring in drugs, bringing in these young women who were sexually assaulted and raped coming through the porous border. And there you had President Trump saying, no more. Do you think that, in the role that you're playing in Congress, that Congress is also doing enough to make sure that we're supporting the president, or do we need to do more?
I think that we're doing good. I also think, though, that a lot of Congress, unfortunately, now is driven by the media cycle. And so what you saw is, and it was so interesting to me because when you heard about these narco strikes and they were trying to paint literally drug pirates, is what we're going to call them, as somehow innocent people that weren't trying to kill millions upon millions of Americans. After these security briefings that they gave Congress, notice how that just completely disappeared from the media cycle. Notice how after they were trying to intentionally dox members of Delta Force that were actually going and arresting very bad people, that all of a sudden it just dropped from the media cycle. And so what I will say is, you probably just saw yesterday, but Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, after saying that they would do nothing to secure our elections with voter ID, they said, well, we don't want to back ICE. We want to make sure that ICE agents have to show voter ID, et cetera. And so we have to ensure that these organizations are funded. We know that the Coast Guard has been doing wonderful things for the drug interdictions, but you're talking about something that for far too long you had stated that Joe Biden did nothing. I think that was intentional. I think that when you are advocating as a president, when you're advocating on your campaign trail for open borders, you're basically sending a signal, hey, how you doing? Come over. The United States is open for business. And just in my county alone, in Pinellas County, we found pounds upon pounds of fentanyl, more than could kill not just the entire population of Florida multiple times over, but the entire U.S. population.
How did it get there? Do they know?
They don't know how they got there, but what I will say is Florida has notoriously had issues with it coming right up through the Gulf of America.
The Gulf of America. But you bring up a great point, which is the fact that there's a demonization of these ICE agents that are really, their goal is to take the criminal illegal aliens out of the country, right? The criminals, where we've had Tren de Aragua, we've had MS-13, these gang members who came through the border. I mean, many of them did. Do you think we're doing enough? Again, I'm going to say this in terms of breaking those gang members, those gangs that are located, for example, in states like Florida.
I think we're doing enough for now. I would like to see, though, likely the Treasury Department, if people are tied to these terrorist organizations, to immediately cut funding, because we know that money tends to be really their main avenue of how they get around it. I think that it's interesting because now they're looking towards crypto, I think, to do a lot of their transactions. But we also talk about what these organizations were doing. I mean, these cartels, these narco traffickers are working with China. They're working with Iran. A lot of people don't know that. They don't talk about that, and it's kind of spooky for them. But you see how well these organizations are operating and how well they're infiltrating. And what I will say is that right now, when you talk about the topic of ICE specifically, or deportations, or you talk about what was happening with the narco boat strikes, a lot of bot accounts were activated to convince young people, especially, that this was somehow anti-American. And that what we saw was there was this foreign funding aspect of very, very wealthy Marxist, communist, billionaires that were working on behalf of the Chinese government to intentionally target a lot of these American protesters to say, look, this is anti-American. Meanwhile, it's the Chinese government that's benefiting from it. I mean, it's no different. We saw, famously earlier this past year, the anti-ICE riots, and there was these brand new unfolded Mexican flags. Like, look, I'm half Mexican, and I don't even have a brand new crispy Mexican flag hanging out at my home. But they're passing these out. It's no different than what they were doing with passing out a lot of these flags during the George Floyd riots. They're simply using these people. It benefits another country. Narco-terrorism is a real thing. It's very scary. And if we don't have a strong security perspective in the United States and we don't handle it accordingly, people will die.
And people have died in the hands of the narco-terrorists. I think a key component here is obviously we have a lot of our Mexican partners here with us, a lot of our friends from Venezuela and other countries, from Latin America. Their concern is how can the U.S. work with the Mexican government to make sure that we're able to tackle this issue of the drug cartels. They run, as I was talking to Ivan, they're controlling a vast majority of the economy. They're the ones that threaten lives, kill politicians in Mexico. I mean, we always worry, and we have the political violence here in the U.S. In Mexico, it's threefold.
I understand the position that a lot of Mexican officials are in, because if you do come out publicly against them, they will kill you. We've seen that. It is not even hidden at this point, and we understand that. But please also understand that the only way that it's going to get better is if you accept help from the United States. And that is something that I don't see anything changing anytime soon unless it's done. It has become so systemically corrupt and controlled. And trust and believe, my family came from, or half my family came from Mexico. So it's
Which
not
part of Mexico?
Literally, my grandmother went to college in Mexico City, and then my grandfather in Acapulco.
Oh, wow.
And so we have family all around. But the point is that I understand the position that you're in, but when you see this anti-American sentiment coming from the president, that's not a good position to be in as well. And so I think, and I'm sure that there's back channel conversations happening every single day, but it's not the position of, me, for example, or a lot of my colleagues, that we don't want, a relationship with Mexico. We do, but we also understand that if we don't aggressively approach this, if we don't aggressively deal with the cartels, that Americans are going to get hurt, Mexicans are going to get hurt, and ultimately we'll never be able to have a great relationship, because that's still something that's going to be hanging around in the background.
Yeah. And China, obviously, I think playing a big role, as you mentioned. They are setting up, drug facilities in Mexico as well.
Sending the supplies for fentanyl, etc. Right. I mean, literally trafficking. And honestly, it's the people that get hurt the most. There's people benefiting it, but it's the Mexican people that get hurt the most. It's people in South America that get hurt by this. I was talking to President Bukele, and we'll be traveling down to El Salvador pretty soon.
And you were there, right, before?
Yeah, we were there. We actually went to CPAC and was talking about how he was able to clean up El Salvador. And it took, really, I do believe God worked with him, and I do believe that God blessed his leadership, because had he not been elected, and the cartels were so just cavalier in thinking that he would not arrest them. But in one night, they went and arrested 1,000 of the top heads of all of the gangs in the area, and they cleaned it up. Right? We're like, round of applause for Bukele, because he's an amazing leader. But that needs to happen similarly in Mexico.
So I found something very interesting. I want to get your opinion on this. We have our CPAC Center for Combating Human Trafficking. Our director, Frank Russo, is here, who does an incredible job on this issue. We have so many international partners on this. But I will tell you, I find it difficult to find Democrats to help us. Do you find that to be the case when it comes to this issue of narco-terrorism? Or do you think the Democrats are coming on board saying, yes, this is good. This is good that we're fighting the drug cartels. This is good we're moving forward with foreign, calling the cartels or designating them foreign terrorist organizations?
I think that it's a complicated question, because there is an aspect of the Democrat Party that openly ran in 2016, 2020, and 2024 on open borders and anti-deportation efforts. Why they did that, and this gets into our political landscape here in the United States, but the largest voting minority in the country now is Hispanic Americans, specifically of Mexican descent. So when you saw the pictures of deportations, et cetera, they'll always show you someone that looks to be Mexican American or Mexican in general. They won't show you the Chinese, they won't show you the Middle Eastern, they won't show you the African military age males that are coming here. And that's strictly for propaganda reasons and purposes. But when I saw a lot of these Democrats in the security briefing about what happened with, for example, the boat strikes, they got very quietly all of a sudden because they realized it. So there is this aspect where they will try to use it to get reelected, but I also believe that some of them in their heart of hearts know what's happening, know that it's wrong, and so they have to speak about it. So you'll see that split even within their own conference. And unfortunately, politicians does not tend to attract the best people. A lot of us, they say politicking, you guys are all ticks. I kind of have to joke sometimes because it's true. Ticks are known as bloodsuckers, and that's most politicians. But the point is that, it's very hard to find people that are genuinely doing this a lot of times for the right reason. And so they do exist sometimes still in the Democrat Party. But again, just like in the Republican Party, sometimes it's a rare find.
So let me ask you about the tech companies. Do you think they also have a role in making sure we can combat the fentanyl coming into this country? We know, for example, there's been times where they've sold, like teenagers. My daughter was telling me this, that they are able to buy drugs, through what it would be social media, and then it's laced with fentanyl.
Yeah, and in fact, they were actually making the drugs look like candy to target younger, I guess, younger buyers. Obviously, end up killing kids. But yeah, actually, I was reading an article about how the FBI and DA was actually finding some of these traffickers, and they were finding them on social media. On Instagram, they were looking at how they were kind of advertising the lifestyle, you know, gold-plated AR-15s, gold-plated handguns, stacks of cash. And so they're able to track it down that way. And I think our law enforcement does work good with different intelligence agencies depending. But the fact is that we shouldn't be in a position in society where we have to worry if your kid goes and does something stupid that they're going to end up ODing from fentanyl, right? And it shouldn't also be the case where if you want to engage in a trade partnership into Mexico, you go down as an American business or whatever, that you have to get private security. Like, imagine what the people of Mexico are going through and not actually being able to feel safe unless you have to pay for that. And so it's very unfortunate because, again, Mexico is beautiful and we have beautiful people. Okay, but it's unfortunate that we're in this position. And so if we can come down on the drug clientele here, and if we can come down with stricter law here and enforcement here, it will affect what happens over there for better. And I think that it's a mass beneficial thing for both countries.
What's your final message here? You know, we have a lot of our leaders here from Mexico, from Latin America, a lot of Americans here as well. What's your message to them in terms of our call to action? What can we do to support what you're doing?
Yeah, so as of right now, the administration released their national security strategy, and under the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, there is an active effort and willingness to work with any South American or Central American country that wants to engage in countering narco-terrorism. This is not something that's a false promise. There will be massive benefits, economic opportunity, trade opportunity, if you choose to get on board and ask for the assistance of the U.S. government. And I would highly encourage you to do it. El Salvador is a perfect example. Look at what's happening in El Salvador. And I also understand the position that you might be in physically. I understand that it's dangerous, but you have to take a stand against this because if you don't, your children, your grandchildren, your country will cease to exist. And I do believe that Mexico is an incredible country, could be a great trade partner, ally of the United States, and I'm happy to support the administration and any elected official that wants to get on board.
All right, Congresswoman Ana Paulina Luna, such an honor to have you here with us.
Please welcome CPAC Chairman Matt Schlapp in conversation with the Director of the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy, Sarah Carter.
Matt, you pushed me forward. He was coming out first, but he didn't want people to get confused.
I was raised right.
Yeah, that's right, you were.
Beauty before age. Sarah, you could do this interview in Spanish or English, but let's do English, okay? Is that all right?
Yeah, thank you, thank you. I did do a little bit in Spanish in El Paso, and I think I got my point across, but I did realize that I do need to work a little bit more on my Spanish. My mother would have definitely said.
You know, you might not have heard, but Senator Hagerty was here talking about that it's wrong that the Senate takes too long to allow a president, in this case President Trump, to have his officials. You were hung up the longest. I bet you would like to see the Senate go a little faster on these nominees.
Yes, I was in a little bit of a state of purgatory, but I want everyone here to know that while I was waiting to be confirmed, waiting for my final vote, I was actually working as a special advisor for the president at the Office of National Drug Control Policy. So I think what was so nice about that is that when I came in, we were able to see what needed to be done, move the right people into the right places, advise, and we worked and with a team, the most amazing team that I have ever worked with for the last 6.5, 7 months on the President's National Drug Control Strategy, which deals with both the demand and the supply side. And that will be presented to Congress as soon as the President's budget is announced. So
people don't know this, but Joe Biden, when he was a senator, had a lot to do with creating this office. It's the shorthand is you're the drug czar. I call you the drug czarina, and I call you Sarah the Great. That's just my way of describing you. But it was a way to give some special emphasis to the administration because the problem was so serious, and it remains serious.
I want to put it to you this way, and I don't know if a lot of people know my background, but I've spent a lot of years of my life, nearly 25 years, covering the drug crisis, both from the U.S.-Mexico border through Central America, South America, but also all the way to Afghanistan, where I spent a good 7 years covering the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, mostly covering Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, Taliban, and the money that was used mainly for these organizations to get their resources, their arms, their weapons, came from drug money. So I'm very familiar with this. And what is so stunning to me when you talk about how Biden was really pushing for this office, both Democrats and Republicans, and this is going way back to when William Bennett was the very first drug czar. Do you know how many people died of drug overdoses back then in the United States when everyone was really concerned about it or were poisoned? Roughly 9,000 to 12,000 deaths a year.
Wow.
Now we were looking at over 100,000 Americans a year losing their life. Losing their life, mostly like frogs slowly boiling in a pot, right? Because nobody would talk about it for a long while. It wasn't until we woke up and started to realize that it wasn't just in the inner cities, which was bad enough. We saw heroin in our urban communities, but it was the fentanyl poisoning that happened after the opioid crisis that was targeting Americans. So people would get a pill. You're a friend, a child, thinking it was an Adderall, thinking it was a Percocet, thinking it was an oxycodone, and they would immediately die. Why? Because the pill wasn't an Adderall or fentanyl, it wasn't an Adderall pill or a Percocet or an oxycodone, it was pure fentanyl and illicit fentanyl. And our adversaries, Matt, saw what was happening in the United States with the opioid crisis, and then they took advantage of that as a proxy war, and they weaponized it against us.
So Trump builds a wall,
right,
closes down the border, which you've covered for years and years and years,
right,
and immediately we have a drop in these deaths.
So this is what is the good news. We are seeing a drop, and I'm very happy to say it's nearly 21% drop in fentanyl deaths and overdose deaths in the United States over the past year. So that for us is a huge, huge success, but it's not good enough. We want to see that trajectory continue to go down. We want to protect not only American lives, but the national security of this nation. And that requires a lot more work. We can't just say, this is done. I saw Ann Thunder in here a second ago, and I don't know where she walked to, but here is, a mother who lost her child. And every single day that I'm in office and that I've been there, I have been talking to families who have had to bear the burden of losing their child, never seeing their child again, never having an opportunity to walk their child down the aisle, never having an opportunity to say, I love you to them ever again. And these are not children and people that lost their lives because, they were addicts. A lot of them were just kids that took a pill and died. That to me is murder. That is not an overdose death. That is absolute murder. And so for us at the Office of National Drug Control Policy, and because, it's so important for us to look at this as a problem, a Western Hemisphere problem, not just the United States. We could talk about demand and blame each other all the time, whether it's demand, whether it's supply. But unless we work together, we're not going to fix this crisis. And it's not just a crisis for the United States, it's a crisis for everyone. When I covered the stories in Mexico, when I would cross the border, I did so purposefully to hear the stories of the people that were living, many of them told me like prisoners, to the cartels that control their communities. That's wrong. We shouldn't be living in these chains, enchained by these nefarious organizations, these narco-terrorists, because that is what they became. And we have to, the only reason why they have the power that they have, by the way, the only reason is because we've empowered them. We allowed them to operate with impunity. Some people liked the money a little too much, but then they paid a big price for that. And now we got to take that power back. And that is exactly what we are doing.
Well done. So we're talking about supply and demand. That's why it's important you started your day at the prayer breakfast, because I haven't really met anybody who gave up an addiction without having God's help. And then the government has to do the right thing. But you close down the border. President Trump closes down the border. You get this 21% drop. My guess is that's just the first drop. The drop will continue. But there's a lot of people say, oh, I thought we just had to close the border, and now it's done. So okay, give us the next 3 things that have to happen immediately so that we can cut even more of the supply down.
Such a great point. Closing down the border is step one, right? It not only protects the American people and our national security and those that want to transport narcotics and illicit narcotics into the United States, but it also allows our officers the ability to do their job and kind of funnel where those choke points are and be able to try to stop the cartels from moving their supply in other areas. So we understand that the cartels don't want to stop. these cartels, whether it's CJ&G, whether it's Sinaloa Cartel, Beltran Leyva, you can go on and on and on, Ariano Felix, all the derivatives thereof are going to try to look for new and better ways to move their supply into the U.S. So the most important aspect, I think, for us and for our nation and our political leaders is, one, we have to monitor emerging threats. Never again in the United States should we have to wake up 3 to 4 years later and say, oh, wow, we lost over 100,000 people a year. Why is there poison fentanyl all over our streets? Why was there a mass casualty in Baltimore? Why is there a mass casualty in Maine? We need to be 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 steps ahead of our adversaries and ahead of the cartels. We can't give them an inch. And that requires us as the government to work together as a whole of government, which is why the president has been so focused, and I think this is so important, on our HSTFs and working together as a team. And what my office does is coordinate and ensure that the president's money that is being utilized to target the narcotics and the drugs, that money is being utilized properly and that we are looking at the right places, right, to stop this. So first and foremost, we look at emerging threats. We never get caught off guard again. I pray we never get caught off guard again, because fentanyl is one thing, but imagine somebody intentionally targeting us, what they could do. And that is a national security threat beyond anybody's imagination. Second, we need to give parents, educators, guardians, the tools and the resources to fight back. We can't do this by ourselves. I'm telling you right now, we can have the greatest thinkers, the most active minds, the best intelligence, the greatest law enforcement, but unless we have our parents and our teachers and all of those that are out there, our coaches, our activists, very excited, by the way. I'm going to be heading to the NFL right after this, so I'm flying. No, I wish I was going to go to the game. I'm not going to the game. Don't get all jealous. That's not it. I'm going to a lunch with the coaches, part of Coaches versus Overdoses, and I'm so excited about working with the NFL on this. But that is about giving children, parents, teachers, anyone you can imagine, a guardian, the tools and resources necessary to fight this fight. I'll tell you a quick story. I was in Ohio during the height of the opioid epidemic. It was the most tragic thing, Matt, I ever saw. I got there, it was like about 2017. I was doing some interviews, and before I went to go meet with Dr. Ortiz, who was the coroner in Franklin County, I was talking to all these businessmen, mostly men. At that, I think there was one woman, and then the rest were men. And I said to them, if there was a predator, and you knew right now, you got a text message, hey, there's somebody at the school, and they are coming for your child. If you got that on your phone, and they're coming after your child, what would you do? Every single guy in there was like, I would get down to that school, I would kill that guy, I would go after that person, they would never touch my child, everything you can imagine. I said, right now, at your school, that predator is hunting your child. They are. And when they go home at night in their bedroom and they're on their phone and on Snapchat and on all these other social media, which is great, 'cause I'm all about the future and technology, but if you're not paying attention to what they're looking at, that predator is hunting your child.
So, Sarah, you said so China could decide, our enemies could decide to have like a mass casualty event. So we have to be on the lookout. And the second thing is that you have the White House seems to be going after these drug boats, and they're interdicting them and taking steps. That's not going to come through the border. That's coming another way, like through a port or something. So that's something we got to look at. But what else? Is it like the mail?
We are using, it's the mail. It's coming in through the mail. They're coming in on boats. They're coming in aircraft. They are finding every which way to try to reroute our supply chain. So for us, and my job, which is, I think, vitally important for us to look at that supply chain and ensure the sanctity of the supply chain. Look, I'm all about capitalism, making money. Let's get our supplies across the border. We know how much it is. The billions of dollars between Mexico and the United States alone is important to both of our nations. But how are we going to secure that supply chain and ensure that that supply chain is going to be moving smooth, that the trucks that are coming back and forth across the border are not filled with drugs? That is where Mexico and the United States can work together. First and foremost, let's clean up the supply chain and hold companies accountable that do not want to clean it up. If you don't want to cooperate with us, if your supply chain is full of illicit narcotics every time we do an inspection, then we have a problem, right? Maybe we should do something about it. And these are areas that I know and I would imagine that Mexico would want to work on with us. Because look, we should be the envy of the world. We should be the envy of the world. We have the most incredible resources, the most beautiful cultures, the most amazing climates. How many people just want to go to Mexico? I would go vacation to Mexico all the time. That was my life. Oh, where are you going to go? I'm going to Mexico. Why? Because it's beautiful, because the climate's great, because, yeah, it has everything. The food, yes, the food, number one, of course. The food, everything. We're neighbors. We share so many similarities. We have so much to give one another.
Sarah's so politically correct. She did not say tequila.
I did not say tequila, but
I
have to be honest, Matt, I have not had any tequila since college. I'm just saying. There was an experience.
And I'm also happy that you're going to go meet the NFL owners, but you're not talking about the halftime show. You're talking about real stuff, right?
Yeah,
real policy.
Real policy.
You let
real
the president
policy.
handle the halftime.
Real policy.
Okay.
Because look, it's about getting the coaches, right? And our sports players. We want our kids to be healthy. No baby is ever born, or human being, right? You're never born thinking, man, I can't wait to grow up and be a drug addict. It's going to be awesome. I'll live on the streets. I'll be dirty. I won't have any money. Maybe I'll just die and no one will even know that I ever existed. There is not one human being that should ever have to go through that. And when I walk on the streets of this country, and I have made it my mission to talk to them, because any one of those people could be your child. Any one of those people could be your brother. Any one of those people could be your sister or father. They're still human beings. They deserve dignity and they deserve respect. And when I was gonna get my third point, I didn't make it. I want it to be easier for people who want treatment to get treatment, easier for them to get that than drugs on the street. That's what I want.
You didn't get to your third point because I cut you off, so that's
No, that's okay.
that's a moderator foul.
I was holding on to it in the back of my head. I was just like, I'm gonna.
Do you want to rip through the three again real fast in order?
Oh, don't trick me
Okay.
like that.
Okay.
But I definitely do.
I need repetition to remember all this. 'Cause
Emerging threats.
Yes.
I want it to be easier for
Yes.
people to seek treatment.
Yes.
And I want mothers, families,
Yes.
and anyone who is a guardian or a teacher to have the tools and
Yep.
resources necessary to be able to fight this with us. This is a battle, folks. We are the foot soldiers, all of us. We are the foot soldiers, and I'm willing to stay awake day and night to fight this with you, and that's what makes this so incredible too, right? For the first time, we have a president that is saying, hey, let's do it. Let's fix this problem. How do you think it needs to be fixed? Let's get out there and do that. Whether it's using the Department of War, the Department of Agriculture, the Housing Department, the HHS under Secretary Kennedy, Catherine Burgum right now with the Great American Recovery, we are going to work together. We are not going to compete against one another. We are not going to ask for any kind of glory. We are going to work together to solve the problem. Because if we don't, we're going to lose our kids. Matt, we cannot afford this any longer. We can't afford to bury our children any longer. It is unacceptable. It should have never happened to begin with. Our children and every person, even every addict, should know that we care about them, that we love them enough to fight for them, that they mean something. Why do you think kids do this and they turn away from their family, they turn away from the church and their faith, and they give in to drugs and narcotics and partying, and they just take the wrong road? A lot of them do that because they just don't feel like anybody cares about them. Like they're just not worth it. And they're looking for that someplace else. Now, everybody has their own individual responsibilities, and I can't make someone get treatment if they don't want to get treatment. That's a fact. It's up to them. But you brought up something earlier, Matt, and I was thinking about this, and you talked a little bit about the church and faith and how Bukele was talking about that, and I was there at the prayer breakfast, and I remember Bukele saying, and it was just very poignant, that Solomon didn't ask for riches or money or even for help for his family. What did he ask for? He asked...
Wisdom, right?
That's it. He asked for wisdom.
It's also because he was already rich.
That is true.
He had some of those things
Come on,
already.
don't ruin the story. Don't ruin the story. But it's important because we need to seek that wisdom. We really do. And, faith is important. I spoke to the very first drug czar. By the way, his name is Dr. DuPont. It was before the office was actually established, and he just turned 90 years old this week. And he's met every single drug czar. And I met him, we did a Zoom call. He lives in Maryland somewhere, but I'm gonna go to lunch with him. Smartest guy ever, but he said to me, what was the greatest achievement in the drug crisis, really, like what happened here? Because he says it's unique. No other animal on planet Earth has addiction the way we do, right? It's a uniquely human thing. But he said something that was it gave me a lot of hope too. He said AA and NA, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. 1930s Ohio, AA comes to life. It's based on faith, and it requires the person to make a conscious choice to leave that addiction behind and find strength in a community of people that are willing to support them. And he goes, and it's free, and it's everywhere. You can pick up a phone and find an AA or an NA meeting. And I thought, yeah, that is pretty remarkable when you think about it. And sometimes the simplest solutions are the best solutions. But I'm going to tell you this, and I think this is pretty simple. And this is my message that I really want to get across. To all the narco traffickers out there that have been operating with impunity, your days are numbered, as President Trump has said, and he means what he says, and this administration means what they say. Your days are numbered. It's over. You're done. You're no longer going to control us or own us or take our kids' lives. It's done. It's over for you.
Maybe, Director Carter, I'm sorry I haven't been more formal. You named some names. You brought some names of these cartels and gangs. Who are the worst ones?
Well, I think we know right now when we're looking at the cartels that we're dealing with in Mexico, it's EJ&G and Sinaloa. And I think they understand. Yeah. And they're FTOs. We have designated FTOs. Those are foreign terrorist organizations. We're going to use all the authority and power within the organization to ensure that they know, that we know, that they're going to be over, that they are no longer going to control the supply chain, that they are no longer going to harm our children. And these are the worst of the worst people on planet Earth, right? And those who support them, right? And those who support them. These people do not care about children, women, death. They care about money and power and what they can do and how much power they can have over the people. And they don't even care about their own country and their own people, let alone people that are buying it. They have made prisoners out of their own people, the people that they're supposed to be supporting in their communities. They have turned their communities into war zones and battlefields, and they have turned the rest of the world into war zones and battlefields. And that's not to say that we are not responsible, too, for our part in it. I'm not taking that away. But we can't just say, oh, because there's demand, we should let these cartels operate with impunity. No. It is a uniquely human condition to have addiction. But that does not give the cartels the right to operate with impunity. That's it. It's just as simple as that.
Sounds like, to the people of Latin America, especially Mexico, help is on the way.
Oh, help is on the way. I'm so excited to be working with all of you. I'm looking forward to it every single day. It is a mission. The Western Hemisphere is a jewel, and I do believe that this Western Hemisphere is going to be the envy of the world. It is my pleasure to be working with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank
How
you.
wonderful.
Oh.
The way you work in Mexico, we've been to all different meth labs, everything. We've been working out Sinaloa. Do you know how Sinaloa knows a dose of fentanyl? They give it to the homeless if they die. I would love to have 5 minutes. Yes, we have 5 minutes for an interview.
Please welcome the moderator for the Victims, Faith, and Resistance Beyond Borders panel, CPAC Senior Fellow, Mercedes Schlapp.
Okay, everyone, there's food. That's good. Make sure you eat your lunch. I think we have the rest of our panelists coming. Ernesto, you announce everybody?
I don't know. Yeah, go.
Did we lose Ernesto? Oh, Simon. There's Frank. All right, well, I'm going to announce everybody here. I've got Frank Russo joining me, CPAC Director for Combating Human Trafficking, Pastor Joshua Navarrete, Pastor and National Faith Director of Bienvenido USA, and Fentanyl Angel Mom to Weston, an anti-fentanyl activist, E. Simon Vargas, who will be joining us, a former Secretary of Government of Hidalgo and political analyst, and we'll have Simon join us here. And there he is. Simon's such a champion. He's so great. Thank you all so much for joining me here. I'm going to start primero con usted, señor. Simón, usted coordinó la campaña contra el narcotráfico bilateral. ¿Crees que fue una campaña con éxito, algo que debemos de seguir haciendo? ¿Qué piensas en eso?
Bien, muchas gracias. Merci por esta oportunidad de venir a hablar aquí con todos ustedes. Muchas gracias a la audiencia. Definitivamente sí. Hace años, esto es un problema de más de 60 años, el narcotráfico, y en aquel entonces solamente ¿sí? Había tráfico de drogas. En el 87 hay un acuerdo entre Cali y Medellín, los carteles imperantes de la droga, y deciden ya no pagar dinero para protección, sino que deciden pagar con droga. Ese es el primer cambio de mercado.
So it's almost, just so you know, for the speaking English, like you change it from like you pay with drugs, not money, is kind of what they were doing in Mexico.
Así es. Pero después de eso, pedían favores, luego se aliaron con muchas autoridades policiales y militares y pasaron a imponer condiciones. Y hoy imponen candidatos. Ese es el gran problema. Pero la nueva modalidad es que se aliaron con narcotraficantes extranjeros.
So they're aligning themselves with the narco-traffickers who are on the outside, basically, for the foreign narco-traffickers.
Y lo último, se aliaron con terroristas.
And they also align themselves with terrorists. So this is how serious it became. So then he was part of this campaign against the narco-traffickers.
Entonces, estos agentes del mal, porque ellos quieren la cultura de la muerte, frente a nosotros que queremos la cultura de la vida, ellos necesitan enfrentar una fuerza, ¿sí?, suficientemente agresiva, presente, como la que está dando el presidente Trump.
Right, so they need, to face these narco-terrorists, what they need is a forceful front, basically, against them. Like it's what we're seeing in Venezuela, that we've been able to go after the narco-traffickers, put them on defense.
Así es. Y en esa medida, sí, podremos dar un paso para erradicar, ¿sí?, un problema que es mutuo. Porque en México se cobra derecho de piso, se mata, como te decía hace un momento, ¿sí?, a los disidentes, ¿sí?, y hay muchas evidencias de esto, y lo que necesitamos, sí, es trabajar más de manera conjunta.
And the narco-traffickers, like their goal is to kill. And so you've seen the fact that they've killed the mayor in one of the towns, in one of the regions in Mexico. He was going to be probably governor of that area, and they don't care. Like, it's about the culture of death. I do want to get to you, Frank, first. You've been our director for Center for Human Trafficking, Combating Human Trafficking, seeing in the forefront of this how this connects with the drug epidemic that we're seeing in this country, and how it's all circular, right? We were saying how drug abuse is linked to the human trafficking component. Explain that process.
Absolutely, and thank you all for being here and a part of this important conversation. To your point, I think the biggest challenge we forget is with human trafficking, the idea is force, fraud, or coercion. That's how we entrap an individual into a life they don't want to be in. And that takes oftentimes the form of drug abuse, mental health abuse, and significant challenges to individuals who sometimes do come from stable environments, sometimes don't, but that's not the goal. These traffickers, what they originally traffic, and I tell everyone, is that coercion piece. They are experts in coercing individuals into taking steps that they don't want to take in their life. And I think that's the hardest bridge we have to gap in this space. Understanding that this crime happens because people in every walks of life can be forced into something they don't want to be in. And so how does that directly relate to the narco-trafficking? I think it's a pretty simple and unfortunate answer, and it builds on what we were just talking about. So important. As drugs became such a driver from a financial standpoint, the next driver, unfortunately, became people. In the last 4 years, we saw that trafficking an individual is the greatest you can take. They can go and speak and say something about their own abuse, but it became so significantly profitable, so safe to engage in for 4 years, that it became the #1 crime we saw coming across our border.
And Anne, tell us about Weston.
Well, this is my son, Weston, and he's just an amazing kid. He was 15 years old, had the whole world in front of him. We did everything to set him up for a bright future. He was Christian schooled, played sports, loved to surf, had a lot of friends, with the California dream. And at a new school, he was offered something. We had talked so many times about, never trying anything, but he was prone to peer pressure. And he tried something, we believe a quarter of a pill, and it had enough fentanyl in it to kill him. It wasn't a fentanyl, it wasn't a Percocet, which is what he had heard from his doctor in the past. I did not allow him to take Percocet, but he had been offered it. So this little blue pill that looked just like a Percocet, same color powder, same imprints, same everything. Thought he could do it safe. His doctor let him have it. It's going to be okay. He can get some cool points at school with these new kids. And unfortunately, he was wrong. These kids can't experiment anymore. They can't do things to fit in because now they die. I do think it's important to say thank you to those in the Mexican government who are here right now, because last year, 92 transnational criminals were apprehended. These were cartel members, and you worked really hard with the United States government as well, with taking out pop-up labs and really working on this crisis. So I did want to take a moment to say thank you.
Anna, and you've got to spend time with President Trump, too, and there's that wonderful picture of you. You were hugging him, I think, or it is, how has President Trump been able to understand this fight?
He, from day one, came in, and I knew he would. From day one, securing the border immediately. I mean, that was such a huge thing. And no border crossings, virtually no border crossings since he's secured the border. He came in, shut down the de minimis loophole, which is inspecting packages under $800. It was not happening. He came in and he changed that loophole, so now we inspect things. Triple tariffs on Shein and Temu, which are huge. They would ship their individual sellers, so they could ship things over here. They're shipping bricks of fentanyl, so that was huge. Tariffs were a big one, and people are, it's really been effective, and people are cooperating, which we're grateful for. He signed the Halt Fentanyl Act. That was a big one. That was the one where I was hugging him. Yeah. And that criminalizes people who are selling it, because unfortunately, the last administration, when my son died, my hands were in my face, just daily going, why are they allowing this? Why aren't they doing anything? They're doing nothing. They took away the fentanyl machines at the border, to test people coming in. It just seemed like they were almost inviting it. So criminalizing, it just didn't happen, especially in the state I lived in, California, where people would get caught with $400,000 of low-loop pills and given a court date to come back in 2 weeks and released. And it was almost intentional, like they were inviting this epidemic. President Trump came in, he's now criminalizing them. Now recently he signed Bruce's law, made right off the bat, cartels were designated terrorists, and now fentanyl is a weapon of mass destruction. But we've got more work to do, and he's doing it every day. I see something in the news. He's relentless. He doesn't stop. He's fighting for us, and he's fighting for everyone, because fentanyl is dangerous no matter what country you're in. And we do see it now going into other countries. So President Trump has been a world leader on this issue, and he continues.
So, Pastor, I want to ask you, you counsel families, you've seen the hurt and pain in these communities. How is faith like the most important part of this healing process, especially where government is failing?
Thank you for having me. I'm Mercedes and CPAC. Faith is a huge factor in all of these areas of life, because a lot of these numbers that are floating around on this stage, to us as a church in inner city communities, aren't just statistics. It's somebody's son, daughter, mom, or dad. So what my faith is, I'm encouraged because I'm watching families choose faith and choose hope in spite of the tragedies that are happening. It's, stories like this one where you could give up and say, I have no more hope or no more faith. But more and more people are looking to the church. They're looking to people of faith, and they're looking for hope. And they're finding hope in their local communities like ours, even though numbers are up. I was telling some of the back today that from 2020 to 2023, there was 900 cases of fentanyl cases in our community. Started in 2020. By 2023, it went to 7,000 cases. So in that time period, we saw an influx of death, tragedy, and turmoil. But now that the administration has turned it around, we are seeing hope arise. And people that were struggling then are found hope within their church community. So that, to me, is where faith stands. And as long as we turn to God and use our faith and have hope in our faith, there are answers not just within legislation in this country, but also within our communities.
Simón, ¿cómo las iglesias se están involucrando en esta batalla contra las drogas, contra los narcotraficantes?
Qué bueno que mencionas el punto, y quisiera hacer una acotación. ¿Cuánto vale una vida?
He's saying, what is the worth of a life?
Porque cuando tocas a una persona y dices, perdí un hijo, perdí el esposo, perdí a un padre, a una madre, eso es dolor. Y eso se vive del lado de Estados Unidos, ¿sí? Con casi 100,000 muertes al año solo por fentanilo, ¿sí? Pero hay toda una serie de delitos conexos, cocaína, marihuana, etc. En el caso de México, la Iglesia Católica, desde el 2022, lanzó una convocatoria, ¿sí?, en un diálogo nacional por la paz y la justicia. La Conferencia del Episcopado Mexicano, la Compañía de Jesús, los jesuitas, la Conferencia de Superiores Mayores de todas las órdenes religiosas, ¿sí?, y la Dimensión de Pastoral Social. Y convocaron a la sociedad más de 140,000 participantes en foros en todo el país, y en el 23 concluyó el foro de Puebla, y le entregaron a las tres candidatas a la presidencia de la República, 2 mujeres y un hombre, las propuestas. Hoy no hay avance.
No hay avance. So they're basically saying that several years ago the churches all came together, they gave like a proposal of how to fight this drug issue in Mexico.
Sí.
Nothing happened, and now the churches haven't done anything. Las iglesias no han hecho nada.
No, pero bueno, no hay avances del lado de las instancias, porque no estamos hablando solamente del gobierno federal, estatal y municipal.
He's saying that the governments have done nothing with what the churches have given to them to say this is how we can help in this fight. So it's the governments, both the federal, state, and local government.
Exacto. Pero estamos hablando de un esfuerzo de toda la iglesia, mexicana.
This is Catholics, you know, Episcopalians, this is all Protestants.
Sí.
You know, this is a big mix of religions to say this is an issue that we're seeing in our community, and the government is silent. They're not getting anything done.
Pero también las iglesias, ¿sí? La Confederación de Iglesias Bautistas, también ha hecho su parte. Y han estado movilizando a la sociedad para conocer sus demandas, porque ellos recogen las demandas ciudadanas. Porque el dolor que se vive en una familia, al primero que se busca normalmente es a la iglesia, a las iglesias.
I want to say this. You can always be me to be a translator anytime. But he's right. When you experience a loss, right, in your family, a fentanyl loss or a drug overdose, you know, you lose your son, your husband to violence or drugs, one of the first places you turn to is the church.
Y recientemente, hace unos días, el 1 de febrero, concluyó el segundo encuentro nacional de la Iglesia con todas sus instancias en Guadalajara. Van a hacer este resumen y se va a volver a entregar a las autoridades, a todas. Ahora se quiere trabajar más con las instancias municipales.
Yeah. And I would say, so I just want to add that they're going back, the church is going back at it again to ask the government, we got to get something done.
Pero también es bueno mencionar que los empresarios, principalmente Coparmex, está haciendo, ¿sí?, un esfuerzo en todo el país para decir, los empresarios están siendo amenazados, secuestrados,
The businesses are being threatened and, ¿cuál era la otra? Threatened?
están siendo asesinados,
And killed,
secuestrados.
businessmen
Sí.
in Mexico.
Sí.
They stand up against the narco-traffickers.
Sí.
Yeah, but the businesses are, so they're also raising up and saying, we need to do something here. I want to bring this up to you, Frank. You know, we've talked about these faith-based organizations and how critical they are in this healing process, especially for victims and their families. Tell us more about it.
And it's building on a point that has been so pushing about this, that this is just numbers. But I'll take a step back and say for the cartels, it is about just numbers. They care about the money, not people. And what they don't count on is the courage of people like Ann to step up and say, we're done with this. The courage of business leaders who face threats, and really the courage of the church to step in and focus on rehabilitation. So when I think about this process, we talked about it in the backstage, it was really a question about, well, does it end at arrest? No, the process begins at arrest. Because then we have survivors and victims who we need to get to court and support those prosecutions. Then we need to provide those survivors and victims with support and help to reestablish their lives. Because again, those cartels do not count on their survivors being successful. And that's how we can take the fight to them, by actually providing a pathway through this faith-based programming that the pastor just mentioned into a successful life that then turns those cartels and traffickers into the criminals they are and gets them behind bars.
I think that's a great point, which is the justice part of this that is not being necessarily taking place, especially in places like Mexico, definitely. Pastor, you know, as you're dealing with these families, how do you approach this? How do you get to the youth and say, look, you got to be very careful with anything that could be possibly laced with fentanyl. But how do you deal with this? What is the church's role?
So that's a good question because, you know, it sounds a little cliche. You do want to surround them with love, right? But you have to do the work. You know, love requires work. And so I think it's very important that community churches like ours put programs together, like Christian school, Christian education. We also have a rehabilitation program that we do for men that come out of incarceration. So you have to provide a lot of support. You do provide a lot of counseling and prayer and those things, but you kind of have to surround the community with operations almost to combat what's coming your way. Even as you know, these kids go to school or they go play basketball. We have a story about a young man that loved to play basketball in our local park. But at that local park, he was influenced to commit crimes. And from there, he went into he got arrested. Then he came out and couldn't break free from what was happening. He eventually lost his life. So we have to continue to fight and surround these schools and create programs for communities, for families, even for people that have been incarcerated and that come out. So it's an endless job, it feels like, and it could be even the most expensive job, as we were saying. It doesn't start at just prosecution. It doesn't end at prosecution, it continues on.
And I want to get you to tell us what's our call. I always like ending with action. What's our action? Like when the people who are out here, who are leaders, who are going back to their communities, what do you want to leave in their hearts?
There's so much. The one thing I would really stress is that, you know, this is the #1 killer of people in America, ages 15 to 48 now. And there were so many people dying. It was equivalent to a jumbo jetliner going down every single day, to put that into perspective. And I think that we need to humanize the faces behind it because there are so many families in devastation. It's not just one child dying. The entire family dies. Friends are affected. There's so much in a community that is affected by this one death in the community. Especially the younger they are, it's very difficult to understand and wrap your head around. But we need to continue fighting. This is an epidemic, and as long as it's thriving here, it's going to thrive everywhere else. With it comes all criminalized, you know, activities behind it. It's a continual fight. As for what I would talk to your children about, I would say, yes, teach them about drugs, but please teach your kids about peer pressure. run scenarios. That is so huge for me, role play, because they are going to be in a situation. It will happen. And if they have this script and they've practiced it, it will be so much easier. Not my thing, my mom's coming soon, I have something tomorrow, whatever it is, and it will also help other children get out of it that will say, you know what, they said no, I can say no too. And so I think peer pressure is a driving force. But as far as, from a global perspective, I think we just, continue, our faithful leader, President Trump is amazing. And always looking to God and praying for our youth is the best advice I can give.
Pastor, I'm going to give you the last 30 seconds here. What is your message to families and communities and how they best can deal with this? I mean, this, what I think is like the devil trying to come and destroy these families with fentanyl and other drugs.
My last message would be this: to continue to fight. Narco-terrorism uses fear and intimidation. But the Bible says that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. So if you give the preacher the mic for the last 30 seconds, you're going to get a little bit of Bible. But continue to fight. Continue to seek God and seek His righteousness. Because when you do, the Bible says that when righteousness rules, the people rejoice. So fight, seek righteousness, and rejoice.
An amen to that. Amen. All right, thank you all. What an incredible panel. Really, really just very special, and I'm honored to have been here with you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
How's the food? Is it good? Okay, good. We try to feed you and keep you happy. That's our goal.
Espero que me lleve, sí. Oye, vamos a hacer México grande otra vez.
Vamos a hacer México grande otra vez.
Gracias.
I have to get my stuff and then I'll go out there. Sure. Thank you.
Hello.
Please welcome the moderator for the Political Complicity and State Failure panel, Grisha Rather of México Republicano.
Greetings, everyone. Are you okay? Yes, fantastic. Welcome. Please have a seat.
Thank you.
I'd like to provide a little bit of context for this panel, if I may. First, Matt and Mercy, thank you for being here, and thank you for having us here. I will be brief, I promise, but this is very important context for what we'll discuss here. The U.S. and Mexico share far more than a border. We share families, commerce, history, and an economy that is deeply integrated on both sides. Our security realities are similarly intertwined. What happens on one side of the border irrevocably affects the other. That shared border, stretching over 1,800 miles, 3,000 kilometers for those of us who use metric, is not just a geographic line. It is a corridor of trade, migration, cooperation, increasingly organized violence, and human and drug trafficking. Both countries face the same threat. What differs is how that threat is defined, named, and legally confronted. That difference may sound technical, but it has profound political, institutional, and human consequences. In the US, terrorism is defined by conduct and intent, the use of violence to intimidate a civilian population or coerce government action. The definition focuses on what an actor does and why, not on who that actor claims to be. In Mexico, however, the legal framework has evolved in a way that systematically excludes organized criminal groups from being classified as terrorists, even when their actors clearly meet international standards of terrorism. This exclusion is not accidental, it is political choice. When we look at the facts, Mexican cartels control territory, impose rules and taxes, assassinate public officials and journalists, coerce entire communities, capture local economies, and have been responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths over the course of a single administration, whether through incompetence, tolerance, or direct collusion. This is not ordinary crime, it is organized political violence. Terrorism at its core seeks to replace or subordinate the authority of the state. Sometimes it creates a parallel authority through fear and coercion. Sometimes it penetrates institutions and turns the state itself into an instrument of criminal power. Both outcomes erode sovereignty. The reluctance to name this phenomenon for what it is not a legal debate. It is an ideological one. In Mexico, official discourse has normalized euphemisms that obscure reality. Calling cartels organized crime rather than terrorists avoids confronting these uncomfortable truths and the need for far more decisive national and international responses. I'm almost done, I promise. This denial has consequences. A state that refuses to name its principal threat cannot design an effective strategy to confront it. Like a patient who rejects a diagnosis, denial does not cure the disease, it allows it to spread. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., the conversation has shifted. Narco-terrorism is no longer just rhetorical. It is being treated as an operational, a legislative, and a strategic problem. That brings us to the central question framing this panel. If the threat is real and increasingly recognized on one side of the border, how long can a state effectively govern while refusing to acknowledge the nature of its most powerful, violent actors? And that is the discussion we're here to have today in this panel. So for the first question, and I will switch back and forth between English and Spanish. Pedro, ¿de qué manera el lenguaje que utilizan los gobiernos influye en la tolerancia social, el comportamiento institucional y la cooperación internacional frente a la violencia organizada?
Muchas gracias, Richa. El lenguaje es el límite de nuestro universo, que diría Wittgenstein. Y eso tiene dos sentidos. Conocemos la cantidad de palabras, de conexión de palabras que tenemos en nuestra cabeza, pero también es el límite de entender al otro. México y Estados Unidos llevan 200 años de malentendidos. Anoche recordaba con Richa pues, el famoso libro de Davidoff, El oso y el puercoespín. La relación es muy complicada, hay una gran susceptibilidad. Con razón, en muchos casos, son dos mundos distintos, conceptuales. Un mundo que viene del catolicismo, un mundo que viene del apoyo de la Iglesia Católica a los más desfavorecidos, a los indígenas, frente a un mundo calvinista, protestante, masón, ¿no? Esa es la visión que se desarrolló durante el siglo XIX y XX, en cierta manera. De ese catolicismo después se pasó a una revolución socialista frente al capitalismo norteamericano, un PRI dominante frente a una democracia y, en estos momentos, un Estado que quiere poner ley y orden frente a un Morena que quiere abrazos, no balazos, ¿no? George Lakoff, el gran intelectual que se dedica al marketing cultural, al marketing político, decía que la gran separación entre el mundo republicano y el mundo demócrata es que el mundo republicano muestra una imagen del padre estricto, del padre que quiere proteger porque el mundo es peligroso, mientras que los demócratas tienen la visión del padre pues, compasivo, que acompaña y demás. Yo cambiaría el símil y diría más bien que el lenguaje de la derecha, de la nueva derecha, el lenguaje de Trump, el lenguaje de Bukele, es un lenguaje varonil, ¿no? De mucha testosterona, frente al lenguaje femenino de la progesterona, de la protección, de la misericordia, del acompañamiento, del apoyo. El tema es que, gracias a Dios, Dios nos hizo hombre y mujer, testosterona y progesterona, y las dos son necesarias. El problema es dónde aplicas cada una de ellas. La progesterona se tiene que aplicar en la casa y se aplica al adolescente, pues vamos a decir rebelde, se le tiene paciencia, se le soporta, se le aguanta cosas porque no hay manera de hacer otra cosa. Pero claro, cuando aplicas el abrazos, no balazos fuera de la casa, ¿qué es lo que tienes? Pues el wokismo. Una falta de sentido común, una emigración descontrolada, una impunidad. Aquí vamos a hablar de lo que pasa en Sinaloa, todos los mexicanos lo sabemos. Yo tengo 2 hotelitos en Airbnb. Yo recibo mensualmente de 2 a 3 llamadas de extorsión. Hasta el día de hoy solo telefónicas. Nadie ha llegado a mi puerta a tocarme, nadie me ha visto la cara y me ha pedido dinero. El día que pase, posiblemente pase, si no hacemos algo, yo creo que si vamos a hacer algo, pues evidentemente yo tendré que pagar lo que me pidan, ni siquiera voy a poder discutir. Bueno, entonces, en ese lenguaje del padre, ¿no? Del padre Trump, Bukele, y de la madre Morena, ¿no? Abrazos, no balazos, es imposible entenderse cuando estamos hablando del exterior. Ahora, claro, la enorme ventaja que tenemos en este contexto es que pues Trump, acaba de decir la señora Carter, pues cuando dice algo lo cumple. Todos sabrán, los mexicanos especialmente, que claro, el tema de la soberanía, volviendo al tema del lenguaje, es un tema muy susceptible. Y es lógico, cualquier mexicano, yo soy mexicano español, quiere defender su soberanía. Y todos estamos de acuerdo. Pero ahora, en este caso, estamos hablando de soberanía. Porque la soberanía no tiene sentido cuando estamos hablando de que fulanito, menganito, los nombres los sabemos, no los voy a citar aquí, son los que gobiernan al gobierno, valga la redundancia, ¿no? Entonces, ¿cómo veo yo la posible relación entre Estados Unidos y México? En este contexto, con Morena, la relación es muy clara. Yo mando y tú estás supeditado, ¿no? Morena, si hace algo, va a hacer en este sentido una supeditación total y absoluta. Y eso va a generar ciertos problemas serios, porque parte de la población no va a estar de acuerdo. Ahora, ¿qué enorme ventaja tenemos? Esa población que ha sido educada durante muchísimos años acerca de lo de Estados Unidos ya está harta. Entonces es una gran ventana de oportunidad. Es muy triste lo que estamos pasando, pero una gran ventana de oportunidad. Porque a la gente ya el concepto de soberanía le vale muy poco frente al concepto de la seguridad de su esposa, de sus hijos y de sus negocios. Esa es una ventaja. ¿Qué inconveniente tenemos también? Que el gobierno Trump, MAGA, no tiene una contraparte, por desgracia. por lo menos en el principal partido de oposición. El panismo, aquí hemos tenido un representante, me da pena decirlo, pero es así, el panismo ha usado ese lenguaje woke, claramente. ¿Por qué? Porque según ellos es lo que estaba de moda. No sé si lo saben, pero los panistas, por cuestiones históricas, han sido muy prodemócratas, ¿no? Y aunque son católicos, aunque teóricamente son pro vida, aunque etcétera, etcétera, pues los grandes líderes panistas en las elecciones siempre han apoyado a Biden. ¿Quién sabe por qué? ¿No? Bueno, sí, históricamente, pero no da tiempo a moverlo. Ahora, tenemos al PRI, digo, yo nunca voté al PRI, yo voto en México, pero pues el PRI actualmente, lo digo, pues creo que actualmente es un partner, ¿no? Perdón por el anglicismo, es un partner más adecuado que el PAN. Y finalmente, pues Grisha, pues haciendo un poco de publicidad de nuestro partido, creo que en México Republicano tenemos un lenguaje claro, un lenguaje varonil, no me importa decirlo, yo no soy feminista, yo no tengo nada contra las mujeres, todo lo contrario, lo femenino es muy importante, pero lo femenino y lo masculino tienen que ir unidos, tienen que ir balanceados. Y actualmente lo que necesitamos en la vida pública es un lenguaje varonil. Creo que gracias a Dios, a Juan Iván Peñaneder, a Grisha y otros demás, y muchos más, nosotros tenemos un lenguaje muy claro. Nosotros queremos seguridad, ley y orden. Y bueno, esperemos que no dentro de mucho, pues aquí el diputado se pase del PRI a México Republicano y podamos gobernar y podamos tener una gran relación entre Estados Unidos y México. Yo creo que eso es probable. Nos falta, pero creo que es probable.
De acuerdo. Muchísimas gracias a ti. Entonces, so there are two aspects that we will discuss in this panel. One is communication and language. The fact that the U.S. has declared the drug cartels foreign terrorist organizations leaves a very clear message in terms of securitization, which means raising the importance of cartels to a level where the entire country and its entire military machinery can be behind it to stop this abuse of our youth in the U.S. And the other is what are concrete actions that we can actually take. So, Mario, if you would please give us your ideas on what we can actually do. One thing is language, but the other is action. What are your thoughts on this?
Muchas gracias, Richard. Buenas tardes o días a todos. Muchas gracias a CPAC por la invitación. Miren, yo actualmente soy diputado federal del PRI. Yo soy de Sinaloa. Vivo en Sinaloa. Tengo 51 años. La legislatura pasada fui senador y en el 2021 fui candidato a gobernador por la alianza opositora. Hoy gobierna Morena mi estado. Tiene 4 años. Y su ciudad capital es Culiacán, una ciudad de cerca de 1 millón de habitantes. No lo digo yo, lo dice el propio gobierno INEGI ante una encuesta. 90% de la gente que vive en Culiacán manifestó vivir con miedo. Y esto es reciente, de hace unos meses. 90%. El otro día a lo mejor son primos de Batman o Superman, o no sé por qué no dijeron que vivían así. Eso no puede mantenerse en el tiempo. No puede continuar así. Y este modelo de narcogobierno, narcoterrorismo, esta concentración de poder, tiene que terminar. Y mi preocupación es que pasamos mucho tiempo los políticos hablando de cifras, hablando de estadística, que si cuántos muertos, que si cuántos desaparecidos, y todo eso es una tragedia. Pero no hemos visto posibles soluciones. No me consta, pero no tengo dudas. Se habla que ahí a mediados, no sé, en 1941, tras bambalinas, el gobierno americano y el gobierno mexicano decidieron ir a sembrar amapola a la sierra de Sinaloa, al famoso Triángulo Dorado, porque se requería de morfina para los soldados que estaban en la guerra. Así inicia lo que se dice ahí en mi tierra, el narcotráfico. Entonces, ¿cómo salimos de eso? Estoy convencido, es un problema internacional, necesitamos colaborar. Y hoy, desde Sinaloa, tenemos una propuesta. El mercado de opioides, solo de morfina, que se usa en los hospitales, todos los hospitales tienen morfina, todos. Si no tienen, no vayan a él. Legalmente, en Estados Unidos son cerca de 8,000 millones de dólares, que se surte principalmente de Australia y Turquía, que hace muchos años hicieron reformas en su ley y lo pueden hacer. ¿Por qué no producir en Sinaloa, en conjunto con Estados Unidos y Canadá, en el marco del NAFTA, morfina legal para uso médico o CBD? Creo que lo podemos hacer ahora. Hay un presidente americano que es práctico, que es disruptivo, hay que pensar fuera de la caja, y yo estoy convencido que Sinaloa, si fue origen, también es solución. Es tiempo y estamos listos to make Sinaloa great again.
Perfect. Thank you, Mario, so much. And I'm sorry to rush you, but I was told we have 5 minutes. It went really fast. Please, Rosie, what is the connection between narco-terrorism and human trafficking?
Bueno, primero que nada, qué gusto que vamos a tener una hoja en blanco en Sinaloa, una nueva historia en Sinaloa, primero que en ningún lado, pero en México vamos a tener una nueva historia. Yo sé que no todo es malo y sabemos que hay muchísimos mexicanos y mexicanas que queremos ese cambio, que sea una nueva historia. Y bueno, ¿cómo está relacionado? Es muy fuerte. Cuando yo fui diputada federal, cuando estábamos junto con mi compañero aquí, César Daniel, haciendo la ley contra la trata de personas, llegó con nosotros, con César Daniel y conmigo, una mamá que tenía a su hija desaparecida. Ver a su hija nos fue a buscar. Desde ahí 2 años buscando a su hija, de encontrarla muerta, estar en el funeral, ver a todas las mamás que le acompañaban con la misma situación, devastadas. Y Leti Moore decidió una nueva historia para ella. En lugar del dolor, se dedicó a ayudar a más. Hoy quiero enseñarles tristemente que tenemos miles de desaparecidos. La Interpol me decía en México que son tantos desaparecidos que somos el país número 1. Empezamos en 2020 con 88 fichas amarillas de Interpol. Imagínense, esto solo es las fichas amarillas. Terminamos con 564 el año pasado. Hay más de 2.200 fichas amarillas. Y estos son los niños y las niñas que ayuda a Leti Mora y Elizabeth Martínez a encontrar a sus papás. Tienen que ir a las fosas, tienen que ir a encontrarse bolsas de restos humanos, desechos, y todas estas personas pudieron haber sido cruzadas. Me tocó estar con Sarah Carter 2 días, con la senadora Marcia McBurn, con la senadora Patty Britt y con la senadora Cindy Hyde Smith, 2 días viendo en la época anterior al presidente Trump cómo estaba la frontera totalmente abierta, y los niños y niñas pasaban por ahí. Cuando en México desaparecen 7 diarios. Y yo les pido que piensen en esos hijos e hijas que tenemos en casa y que un día ves el plato vacío, ves la cama vacía, no hay dinero que te alcance para buscar a tus hijos e hijas. Y claro, por supuesto que esas mafias, que esos cárteles de la droga captan a esos niños para convertirlos en sicarios, para convertirlos en halcones y también, desgraciadamente, en esclavas sexuales. Y por eso hoy necesitamos una nueva historia, y quien esté de acuerdo conmigo en esa nueva historia, si tienen una hoja en blanco, yo quiero pedirles, por favor, que tomemos esa hoja en blanco en nuestras manos y pedirle a Mercy. Mercy y Matt han sido unos aliados increíbles. Yo sé que algunos tienen una hoja en blanco. Aquí está con nosotros el primer ministro de Montenegro, el former Prime Minister, el Dietrich. Gracias por estar con nosotros. Están con nosotros los mejores periodistas de México. Están con nosotros las personas más valientes del mundo, porque tenemos que ser muy valientes para decir basta, para decir necesitamos una hoja en blanco. Y si estás de acuerdo, toma esa hoja en blanco y por favor, pongámonos de acuerdo. ¿Tienes tu hoja en blanco? Ok. Pues Mercy también me dijo que quería su hoja en blanco. Ella y Matt han sido unos grandes aliados, y del 21 al 23 de julio aquí tendremos la Cumbre Internacional contra la Trata. Ahí está Michelle de azul. Michelle, ponte de pie. Ella les puede dar información de esa, y darle las gracias a nuestra presidenta Susan Williams. Gracias, Susan. You are the most brave woman in the world. Thank you to be here. Oh, Mercy, ven con nosotros. Mercy, gracias. Ella estuvo en los refugios de México. A ella sí le importan esos niños y le importa que aparezcan. Gracias, Mercy. Well, ¿por qué no levantamos nuestra hoja y declaramos: Padre, bendice a México, bendice a los Estados Unidos, haznos los aliados más fuertes para que todos los niños y niñas estén protegidos y ninguno vuelva a desaparecer en ninguna parte de nuestro territorio? En el nombre de Jesús, ayuda a estas madres a encontrar a sus hijos, en el nombre de Jesús. Amén. ¿Sabe algo muy triste? Leti Mora quiere renunciar. Los ministerios públicos están renunciando. Las filas de documentos de tantos casos rebasan México. Necesitamos ayuda.
Gracias, Rosy. Mario, I was told that we have 3 more minutes. If there's something else you'd like to say, if that's possible, go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Muchas gracias. De manera muy rápida, yo represento al PRI, nuestro presidente nacional Alejandro Moreno. Creo que nos ha puesto a la muestra, y lo digo con toda humildad, porque hay que ser muy valientes para enfrentar al poder que hoy representa y que hoy lo tiene en México. Quien tenga una duda, los invito a ver su Twitter. Nosotros le decimos Alito Moreno, y requerimos de más valientes, de más valientes. Se lo voy a decir porque lo viví. No hay manera. Uno puede ganar una elección teniendo menos dinero, siempre el que más dinero tiene. Uno puede ganar una elección, incluso, aquí se ha dicho, contra los programas sociales, porque la sociedad es más grande y cuando se entusiasma, pero no hay manera de ganar una elección contra alguien que trae colgada una metralleta al hombro. Eso es lo que tenemos que evitar en México. Y tenemos que hacer un compromiso. La clase política, independientemente del partido al que pertenezcamos o lo que pensemos o creamos, que no podemos continuar en un modelo que rebasó esa línea roja, donde hay una complicidad entre el gobierno y el crimen organizado. Y perdón que lo cite, pero lo voy a decir. Allá en mi tierra hubo un personaje que ya está aquí en Washington, el Mayo Zambada, y dicen que decía: el fuera de la ley no puede ser la ley, porque eso es anarquía, y en la anarquía nada florece. El modelo actual está agotado. Dejemos de pensar únicamente en soldados, en bombas y en guerra, y pensemos cómo le quitamos al narco y a esos que se han coludido con ellos ese poder. Gracias.
Gracias a ti. So I was pointed out that some of y'all didn't speak Spanish, so I'll recap what was said here briefly. So what this panel has underscored is that security cannot be built on euphemisms or partial truths. It requires clarity, alignment, and the political will to confront uncomfortable realities. Cooperation is not a slogan, it is a sustained commitment that demands shared definitions, shared responsibility, and shared resolve. The challenge before us is not merely technical or legal, it is moral and strategic. The question is no longer whether we understand the threat, but whether we're prepared to act with the seriousness it demands. Thank you all for contributing to this conversation, for being here, for listening to us, and for being here today.
¿Votamos aquí o no? Sí. ¿Votamos aquí?
Please welcome Senator Ashley Moody of Florida.
Senators get over here and get lost in this building. It's nice to come over to the House building every once in a while. Of course, if we're honest, I'm one of the newest senators. As you know, I was the Attorney General of the great free state of Florida and became a senator last January. So if we're honest, I get lost everywhere still. But it is wonderful to be with you today. It is so great to see so many people that are here in Washington to meet with our policymakers to discuss what's important to the strength of this nation and see such engagement because indeed the House and the Senate are reflective of you. And so we cannot do our jobs unless you are voicing concerns, engaging with us, indeed sharing what the American people want from their elected representatives. That is how this country was founded. That is how it is supposed to work. And the worst thing we can have happen for the future of this country is to have a public that becomes disengaged from its representatives. In fact, I believe the more separate the public believes that its representatives are from them, the more dangerous it is for our form of government, our republic, living as a free people under this structure, which we have done so now for 250 years. So I truly believe, and came to Washington as a mom of a kid still in school, as the wife of a law enforcement officer, as someone who truly wanted to come here to make a difference. I came here to make sure that the American people not only remain engaged with their government, because indeed it is their government, the people's government, but they trust that they have accountability in their government. Because otherwise, this whole system falls apart. And so when I was asked to come here today to talk to you, to engage about narco-terrorism, what we're doing on the drug front, I was very excited and I jumped at the chance because for those of you that don't know, my entire life has been in service to the safety and strength of this country. I was a federal prosecutor who indeed prosecuted the cartels. I worked with law enforcement, federal, state, local law enforcement to go after traffickers that were indeed emboldened by these cartels, strengthened by their world network, especially in this hemisphere. And I'm the wife of a career law enforcement officer. Indeed, he spent the majority of his law enforcement career as a DEA agent. And so you can imagine his frustration, morale crisis of so many who had spent their lives trying to protect our communities from the poison these cartels threw at them, purposefully. You can imagine the demoralization under the last administration. And so if I could come here today to talk to you about why it is so important that we are now returning to a position of strength against these cartels, to have a commander-in-chief like President Trump who understands that having a president that takes seriously the responsibility, not only of sovereignty and the border and why that's important for safety, but understands that we have been invaded by criminal networks and understood the destruction of death, the tolls that it was taken, that was on purpose by these networks, that the death toll was exceeding those of many of our wars. In fact, I came here today to impress upon you, and hopefully others that are watching, when Nancy Reagan first said, just say no in the 80s, we lost a little over 3,000 people nationwide to drug overdose. And you know during the Biden years, we hit our max, over 100,000 people a year died. To put that in perspective for you, the entire global war on terror, a little over 7,000. The Gulf War, approximately 380. Vietnam, approximately 58,000. I mean, if anybody was not paying attention to that, all they had to do was turn on the nightly news and see the devastation. In fact, as Attorney General, when I heard about the West Point grads that had overdosed in South Florida, or I had a sheriff calling me that said his deputies rolled up on a gas station and 7 people were splayed out in the parking lot from drugs, this was a routine event. A routine event. And so I demanded as Attorney General, President Biden, please declare these cartels foreign terrorist organizations because that is what they are. They are killing more Americans than we've seen in some of our wars. We need to declare fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction because as families get fentanyl will tell you, they did studies that showed if you put that and get that airborne, that can be incredibly destructive. And so what we saw during the Biden administration, which was we just need new laws as Americans died. You can imagine I fought as Attorney General and was one of the first to call for the cartels to be declared foreign terrorist organizations and for fentanyl to be declared a weapon of mass destruction. Biden never did that, even as the death toll increased every year. President Trump did that on day one. That should tell the American people that this president understands that bold decisions, strong decisions are what it takes to protect this country. This president understands that as a commander-in-chief, one of your primary responsibilities is to target those that in a coordinated way are trying to bring harm to our country and America and take active steps to stop it. The cartels are not just criminals. They are murderers. They extort people. They kidnap people. They do not care about our sovereignty. And every single day, as Americans lost loved ones, we in leadership knew we needed to call on a commander-in-chief to do what was right, to make these hard decisions. And this is bigger than Mexico. No one will ever remember when the Mexican president said, "This is not a Mexico problem, this is an American problem. I'm a Mexico first president." Biden did nothing, said nothing, demanded no change, no action. Venezuela is at the heart of these terrorist organizations. They are helping coordinate and push out drugs across the hemisphere. Thankfully, we had a president that understood that that leader needed to be removed from Venezuela and brought to justice in the United States of America, where he had been indicted by a grand jury. That never would have happened if this president wasn't in office. In so many ways, until this president, these criminal organizations believed that they could run roughshod over our country and over our communities. I don't believe they think that anymore. And I can tell you, I have seen this president he has taken not one step back from making sure that he continues to make the tough decisions for the strength, and indeed, many would say, for the survival of this country. And in so many ways, he understands that these criminal networks, these criminal organizations, are indeed armed, coordinated, strategically planning to continue to try and get to our communities to profit. He understands that. And when he says, "I'm going to declare them as terrorists because that's what they are paramilitary groups that are trained and resourced and coordinated and have brought destruction to our country," he says that about them, while Governor Hochul in New York says that about our ICE agents. It is so important that we continue to understand that allowing those criminal organizations, the narco organizations, to take advantage and kill and terrorize Americans is warfare. It is chemical warfare. It is a warfare on the sovereignty of this nation. It is indeed war on Americans. I believe that anyone right now that asks how we can stop this, asks for resources, we need to stay focused on making sure the United States supports what President Trump is doing to end the strength of the criminal narco-terrorist organizations. I came to you today to give you a great speech about what will happen next, what we see out of Congress, more resource going towards this, but I think I want to just tell you, in the year I have been here as a newest United States Senator, and by the way, I am number 99. In the United States, as you know, we have 100 senators. I got sworn in with John Husted out of Ohio. We had a coin toss to see who was more senior. I won. So I'm number 99. Any Floridians sitting out there right now, I'm already winning for you. But I can tell you, and if I can leave one thing with you today, we cannot back down. And one of the things I am disappointed in, disheartened by, is on the Democratic side of the aisle. The words that are being used about American law enforcement officers that are trying to go after and rid the nation of people that are involved with the narco-terrorism networks. It is an attack on the rule of law. It is an attack on people's law. It is an attack on your law. They're trying to give face to being against the people's law. That is not how our country is supposed to work. That undermines the way our country is supposed to function. I, for one, who has seen the bravery and heroism, the people who sign up to wear a badge, who raise their right hand and take that oath to protect our communities, they go into it to be a part of something bigger than themselves. They go into it to be not just guardians, to be a part of this amazing structure of ours, United States of America, who's been around for 250 years because the people have come together and said we're going to make laws to protect ourselves, and this is how we will live together as a free people under the rule of law. And they say, sign me up. Because without them, our rule of law is meaningless, cannot be effectuated. So for the people to come here into our Capitol today, to join so many of us lawmakers and others to talk about where we are as it relates to narco-terrorism, it's bigger than narco-terrorism. Where are we as the United States of America and coming together as a people where we have made laws to protect our citizens? Where are we in supporting the men and women that are executing your laws? Where are we in supporting our president and other elected leaders that are trying to make sure that your laws, your wishes, are being enacted? Because indeed, at the end of the day, I demand in service to you and pledge to you that your safety and the strength of this country will always be top of mind in every decision we make on your behalf. I will always demand that accountability to you, because indeed that is how we defend and strengthen America. So thank you so much for inviting me to join you today. It was such an honor, and I hope you have a great conference.
Please welcome CPAC Senior Fellow Mercy Schlapp, Astrid Gamis, Chair of the Virginia Latino Advisory Board, Sergio de la Peña, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Western Hemisphere, and Fabiola Bukele from El Salvador.
Okay, how everyone doing? Are we learning a lot? Are we getting a lot of information? Well, this panel is going to be all about information. I'm so excited to have experts now we're, in addition to what we've dealt with Mexico, now going into Venezuela, going into El Salvador. I have the great honor of having Fabiola Bukele. I'm sure you're familiar with that last name, a family member of the great president, Nayib Bukele, who Matt and I had the honor to go to his inauguration in El Salvador, and we got to walk through San Salvador and really see transformation that he has done in that great country. So tell me, you grew up there.
Yes.
What changes have you seen with the president now in power and what he's been able to do to make El Salvador the safest country in the Western Hemisphere?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. It's a great opportunity. Just to give you a little bit of context, El Salvador back in 2015 was declared the murder capital of the world. So it has been a huge change. I like to say that it takes God and one man full of courage. I'll say at national prayers as well, he spoke. He gave up brief words, but he specifically said that it was a miracle. I think that every country should take El Salvador as an example, and to take what he did and adapt it to every situation is what you should do. And also, Trump gave a few words where he said that peace cannot be, you cannot have peace without strength. So when Nayib Bukele took over back in 2019, He came up with a strategy called the Territorial Control Plan, and where he implemented it through phases. So he did the preparation, he modernized the army, the whole police, but it was in 2022 where it all started, where, well, in March, the gangs there started like a mass shooting, killing people just to prove their power. So what he did was, with the help of the Congress, this is why Congress is a very important part in the war with the gangs, he declared the state of exception. So he threw the military to the streets, he deployed them, and the military went to the communities and extracted the gangs. Because in El Salvador, our case was that the gang members were treated as street criminals, for example, which is not. They're terrorists. They kill people. I remember one time that they burned a bus down full of people. It was horrible. This is inhumane. So basically, the gangs were not just criminals. They were like a structure. They were a parallel government. And you cannot negotiate with a parallel government. You have to extract them out of the society. And this is what he did.
Now looking, Sergio, you worked in the Department of Defense under President Trump during the first term in the area of Western Hemisphere. I want to get your perspective, because as we've talked about Mexico, El Salvador, Venezuela, where we know that former, thank God I like saying that, former dictator Nicolas Maduro, he is out of there, but he was a big part of pushing this narco-terrorism and organizing crime in that area. Walk us through how that was the case, how that happened under Maduro.
Certainly. Well, let me start with President Trump and his first administration. If you'll recall, we had one of the best alignments that we'd ever had in the history of the hemisphere. The only countries that were out of alignment were Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Bolivia, kind of. And then along came COVID, and COVID changed everything because it locked everybody down, so they blamed the governments. There's a significant drop in the GDP, and people weren't happy, so the governments flipped over. As you're seeing now, we're seeing a resurgence of those that are more aligned with the United States and with the Trump administration. We've got elections coming up in Peru. We've got elections coming up in Colombia, and the same thing in Brazil. And if you look at what's happened in Honduras, if you see what happened in Argentina, the alignment is coming back. The one that may be in question a bit, and I think it possibly too can return, is Brazil. So when that happened, what occurred was you had this this willingness to go after somebody like Mr. Maduro, because first of all, he wasn't elected. He's a usurper and a criminal, and President Trump says, I'm going to go and arrest him. And there was a bounty out for his arrest, and that's exactly what he executed. His other specified task was, we need to return those people that came here back to their countries of origin, because if you'll recall, under the Biden administration, we had 2.5 million unknowns or gotaways. Right. So out of that crew, we could have terrorists, we could have spies, we could have political activists, and they're here. And so this is what the president is now doing in reversing that trend. But in the meantime, we've been able to get all those people into this country, and that's not a good thing because the drug traffickers are there as well.
Well, and Astrid, you're Venezuelan, you're an activist here in Virginia. I think people need to understand how bad was the drug situation in Venezuela. I think Maduro did really work with these cartels. It's one of the reasons why he was extracted from that country. The narco-terrorism issue in Venezuela was very expansive.
Thank you so much for having me here, Mercedes. And that's a topic that is very close to my heart because I moved my family in 1989 to Venezuela. We had newborn. My husband, after we got there a month after, it was a crazy situation with the government. My husband was like, why did you bring us here? I said, because we are going to have a nice business, and we are going to be successful, and we were very young, and we are going to be rich. And he was like, okay. So it was a very bad situation that we live. My husband sent me here with the 2 kids, and he stayed there with the business. And let me tell you, this problem with the drugs was for a long time in Venezuela. Our company was a seafood company, and we export everything from Venezuela to here, and we have to pay people to save our treatment because they used to put drugs in everything. So we knew that that was happening. So after Maduro and Chavez started that movement. He knew that it was something easy to get money, which I don't know why, if we were the richest country with oil, why do you want to be in the bad side? But that's the way that they act. So we have been very happy what is happening right now because the drugs has been a big problem in Venezuela. We have the government sending drugs in their own planes that they use for the government planes. We are like they took over all Venezuela and they control everything in Venezuela. So we are very glad that happened. Venezuelans, we are happy. I have been living here for 31 years, and people say, are you happy? Are you upset about what happened in Venezuela? People call me and say, you must be very upset about what Trump did it. He attacked Venezuela.
Well, you have to share that story because she was at a town hall with this Democrat congressman, and what happened?
Well, I went there because I knew that he was, my main point was like, well, he's going to talk about Venezuela. I want to see, knowing the Democrat Party's, point of view, I want to see, I was like, I want to see what is going to happen. And the first thing that he said, ladies and gentlemen, this Trump, and I hate when they say Trump because I call President Biden, I respect the title. Trump attacked Venezuela, and he's going to make us to be look very mad we are going to be in a war soon. And he started talking about how President Trump attacked Venezuela. So I was lucky enough to be next to the microphone, and he said, the microphone is open. Boom, the second person that I was able to talk was me. And I said, excuse me, but you are very irresponsible telling people that President Trump attacked Venezuela. He just removed a narco-traficante.
Yeah.
And he's going to pay the consequences in the United States.
So, Fabiola, when you're looking at El Salvador, you're seeing that they've been able to put, the criminals behind bars in El Salvador, and then everyone in the world, all the left, they go crazy. They're like, this is inhumane, it's horrible, blah, blah, blah. These are criminals that are being put into jail. How was it, or when it was President Bukele in his mind thinking, why did he feel like this is the actions we have to take in order to allow for public safety?
So the thing is, it's a cultural problem. It's a war of incentives. Like the children in El Salvador, being a gang member, that was their nature. That was what they looked all around. That was their future, So if you don't extract these people from society, they would keep replicating themselves, and that after that the gangs went to Secot and everything, it put everyone into jail. This group of young adults in school started forming this new gang organization and went into social media, TikTok, doing the gang signs and stuff like that, saying they were a new gang. They captured them and they went straight to prison. So it's not a joke. It's not street crime, as I told you. It's terrorism. It's a terrorist group forming. So El Salvador has had enough. We went through more than 10 decades of non-stop killings in El Salvador. In 2015, there were 107.6 homicides per 100,000 citizens. So that's more killings than any country at war. So that has been the highest rate in the world. We were literally the murder capital of the world. So that's nothing you should be proud about. So, and they talk about human rights, about the people that or the gangs that went into Secot, but what about the human rights of the people in El Salvador? They talk about, the human rights of having a good place to sleep. Yeah, but what about the human rights of the people who died in the bus
Right.
that were just going to work and wanted to make a little bit of money just for the gangs to take away their money, you know. So that's my answer.
And I remember when I went to the inauguration and we got to tour in San Salvador, they were like, before you couldn't walk through the streets of San Salvador, if you would have, they would steal your watch, they would even steal your shoes.
Yes.
Okay? It was not safe. I mean, it was not safe at all. I want to go back to, Sergio, your experience especially in Venezuela, as you were a former army attaché down there. What was how powerful were the narco-terrorists, these cartels in Venezuela?
Well, when I was there, it was a different time. And when I was there, it was...
You were there during Chavez, right?
I was there from 96 to 99. But even back then, there were still generals that were involved in drug trafficking. As a matter of fact, a classmate of mine from Leavenworth, I invited him over to my house. I found out later when I was in Venezuela that he was involved in all sorts of massive shipments of cocaine into the United States.
Right.
So you never know who you're going to deal with. And there was another two-star general that had been an exchange officer in the United States, same thing. So even back then, that was already starting to form. The thing is that they control assets that are available to ship drugs into the United States. The challenge with Chavez was that he figured out a way, based on coaching he got from Fidel Castro. Remember, back in the mid to late 60s, Fidel Castro actually sent people to Venezuela to fight. And so what they found is that they couldn't take over with guns. So then Fidel went to Chile. They won the elections. They tried to transition Chile into a socialist country too quickly. So he came
now
back.
we have the new Chilean president, President Cast, who is going to be another ally, a great ally of the United States and President Trump.
Absolutely. So then Chavez was trained by Fidel Castro. If you Google the talk that he gave at the University of Havana in December of 1994, he tells you how he's going to take over the country. He does it very effectively. He got coaching from Fidel, and then he came in, and he started consolidating power very quickly by creating a constituent assembly to rewrite the Constitution, and then eventually he consolidated power. Some of the concerns that we should have about any country that starts talking about a constituent assembly is how you're consolidating power. One of the biggest concerns that I have is you look at Mexico and Morena, they've been able to consolidate power under one party. And when you start doing or you do elections where the judiciary is elected from the ground up all the way to the Supreme Court, one should be concerned about how much of a democracy do you have when you have one party controlling everything.
So, Astrid, how do we fight the narco-terrorists? I mean, in your experience of what you've seen in Venezuela, now living here in the United States, what are you seeing?
How can we fight? We have something that I took my attention today was Sarah Carter talking that we have to be partner with everybody.
Yeah.
We have to work with the community. We have to work with families, the school, the government. We have to have a strong border. I mean, working with Governor Youngkin in Virginia, we saw how the fentanyl issue came down when we would start working with the families and start working.
And now in Virginia, the governor said, we're not working with ICE anymore. We're not
Don't
working
go that
with
way because that's going to...
I know. No, but it's the
but
truth.
It's true. I mean, it's so sad that, that lady is turning everything against us. I don't know if it's going to be safe to live in Virginia anymore. But that's another
Where's
topic.
my no person from Virginia? There you go. I agree. I think it's very challenging.
Yeah,
from a public
it
safety
is.
standpoint.
But we see that if we partner, everybody partner, and we work together, I do believe that that's the only way that we are going to be able to fight that.
So, Fabiola, I might have to invite you over the president to come speak at CPAC USA. But we had the honor of having President Bukele speak at CPAC USA, where it was beautiful. It was I would say over 100 Salvadorians came that were here living in the United States, and they had the El Salvador flag and their American flag, and they really do appreciate what the president is doing there. But he brought up something very interesting. Not only did he talk about the dangers of communism, but he also talked about the importance of building a strong economy, which is his second phase, right? So he's like, I'm going to handle crime, we're going to push for public safety, but now it's en la economía.
Sí. Well, we're in that phase right now because we couldn't invest in all of that without having security first. We're mainly invested in education, in health. We are soon to be opening the biggest hospital in Central America. We are also partnering with Elon Musk for Grok to give AI to all of the public students in El Salvador. So obviously the economy will be growing with all of this, but with safety first, that needed to be done first to be able to go ahead and have a better future for El Salvador. We are aware that there is so much more that we still need to do, but we are in the correct direction.
Going in the right direction.
Yeah.
No, it's been I think it's almost like there's so much light coming out of El Salvador. You know, it's just like there's hope coming out of El Salvador.
Yeah, so if you ever have the opportunity to visit El Salvador, please do. It's a beautiful
And the
country.
beaches are lovely
Yeah.
too. Sergio, let me ask you this. So as, you know, as part of, in your experience at the Department of Defense, we've seen the president be very bold on his actions in targeting these ships that were being run by the drug cartels. I mean, very impressive what we've seen. Is that enough? Do we need to do more? Where do you think, if you would be advising the president right now, what would be your advice?
Well, we did that during the first administration. We were able to round up about, I think either 4 or 5 of those ghost vessels. If they're out there doing illegal stuff, they need to be brought into port. They need to be processed, which is exactly what's happening to those ships now. If they don't have the legal foundation by which to sell their oil, then they need to be confiscated. And I think the president has made that very clear. Now, that's changing because now you have a legal mechanism in working with Delcy Rodriguez as to bring that oil to the United States. And there's an opening with a new oil law that I've been reviewing because there's opportunities for U.S. companies to be able to go down there. Is it ideal? No. But transitions don't occur from one day to the next. As Marco Rubio has pointed out, the Secretary, it's going to take time. You know, you're going to have a process where eventually you get to a transition to democracy, but right now we're moving in the right direction.
Are we going to see the transition to democracy?
Hope that I'm going to see the transition and I'm going to be able to go and visit my country. I was born and raised there. My kids, they don't know Venezuela and they are dying to go there. And yes, I have all my hope in President Trump, and I want to thank him from the bottom of my heart because this is a big change, and it's a big, big help for Venezuela and all the countries around.
Yeah.
So we have to vote and remember that elections have consequences.
Oh, yes.
So,
Fabiola, en español, su mensaje para el pueblo salvadoreño aquí en los Estados Unidos.
Bueno, que ojalá algún día puedan regresar. El Salvador ya es un país seguro para ustedes. Sé que la mayoría de salvadoreños migraron por miedo que los mataran, por miedo a que mataran a las familias. Así que muchas gracias.
Okay, anything in Spanish you want to add?
Muchas gracias por esta oportunidad para compartir con ustedes los retos que tenemos en defensa. Sabemos que son significativos, pero yo pienso que vamos en buen camino y esperamos que cuando empecemos con un alineamiento con el libre comercio y la democracia, vamos a tener buenos resultados.
Perfecto.
para los latinos que están aquí presentes y viven aquí en los Estados Unidos, por favor, acuérdense que lo que estábamos hablando, que las elecciones tienen consecuencias. Es algo impactante que yo estoy viviendo en este momento en mi vida, que los países se están alineando en Latinoamérica y se están volviendo conservadores, están volviendo a lo que somos nosotros. Y nosotros que estamos aquí en Estados Unidos, los latinos que somos una fuerza, tenemos que aprender a votar correctamente, porque somos conservadores. No se dejen solamente, republicanos. No, somos conservadores igual republicanos.
That is right. That's why maybe we all are going to move from Virginia to Venezuela in the rate that we're going to. And as I told my family, if Cuba is free, you guys won't see me for a month. I'll be down in Havana trying to help transition that government too. Okay, that's a deal. All right, thank you all. We're moving right along.
Are you going?
Okay. Oh, am I going on? I need a minute.
Please welcome CPAC Senior Fellow Mercedes Schlapp, Javier Negre, Armando Guzman, Carlos Alarzaki, and Jorge Fernandez.
Perfect. Thank you.
Es que cuando hay muchos latinos, everyone's kissing in the back and talking, and I'm like, we have to go, we have to go. ¿Cómo estás? Good, how are you? Okay, I'm going to sit here, and then you guys are going to all sit right around here. I think they're all going to... I'm waiting for Javier. Where's Javier? Are my other guys coming out? Están conversando ahí atrás. Hello. Okay, esto para mí es un tema personal because, first of all, I think I've known Armando almost my whole life. I'm not kidding you. He would ask me very tough questions when I was at the White House. And then Javier, I've gotten to know so well, and we're a big fan of the work that he does as he's bringing truth to these regions across the globe and really helping to shape elections and let the truth come out, which I think is great. Jorge, conversé con usted anteriormente, y Carlos, mucho gusto. Okay, let's get started. So, principalmente quiero hablar sobre la prensa. Como sabemos, la prensa ha cambiado en una forma que en algunos momentos es como propaganda. Y esto cómo está impactando a la política y en este tema de cómo están cubriendo el tema del narcoterrorismo. So, quiero empezar con usted, Carlos. Dime, ¿cómo ves la cobertura en estos temas de narcotraficantes? ¿Cómo está haciendo la prensa?
Es muy fácil. El gobierno federal tiene cooptado todos los medios abiertos. Les paga una fortuna en publicidad, pero fortuna. Con ese pago de fortuna a los medios abiertos deciden qué comentarista se queda, qué comentarista no se queda.
Esto en México.
Sí, ya te hablo fácil. En 7 años y medio, fácil. 35, 40 periodistas o comentaristas ya están afuera.
Wow.
El nuevo medio...
¿Esto ha pasado durante la época de Sheinbaum o anteriormente?
De los dos.
Okay.
Son Sheinbaum y López Obrador es la misma
La misma
porquería.
persona.
Sí, la misma porquería.
Lo que uno es más feo que la otra, pero bueno.
¿Quién sabe? Eso es número 1. Número 2, hay 3 canales de oposición en televisión digital. Latinos, con Carlos Loret de Mola, Ramón Alberto en Monterrey, Ramón Alberto Garza con Código Magenta y Atypical TV, que soy yo. Y entre los 3, sin ponernos de acuerdo, somos muy críticos, tremendamente críticos contra este gobierno y no permitimos que las mentiras de Claudia Sheinbaum en sus mañaneras se hagan realidad.
Ok, déjame preguntar, Jorge, tienes su programa donde están hablando de seguridad nacional y hablando de este tema de narcoterrorismo por mucho tiempo. ¿Por qué empezaste a hacer esto como tu tema principal?
Bueno, llevamos, gracias por la invitación. Llevamos muchos años trabajando este tema, llevamos 14, 15 libros publicados sobre el tema y llevamos 17 haciendo el programa. Cuando comenzamos a tratar temas de seguridad nacional, no gustaba. Fue de seguridad, narcotráfico y eso, no gustaba que hiciéramos ese programa en la propia televisora, ¿no? Nos decían que era riesgoso, que no tenía mucho sentido. Con el tiempo se fue transformando en un programa de referencia en términos de seguridad. Y en un programa de referencia donde hay que cuidar, decía Carlos, y decía bien que hay muchos medios abyectos, hay muchos periodistas abyectos, pero también hay que decir que hay muchos periodistas muy valientes. Muy valientes en México. Muchos periodistas que hacen investigación, que hacen columnismo, que manejan sus opiniones. Perdón, pero hoy la oposición en México es el periodismo, no son los partidos políticos. Hay políticos, Hay políticos muy respetables, algunos están aquí, pero como partidos tienen mucho menos protagonismo que el que tienen ciertos medios, ciertos periodistas y mucha menos influencia. Y en el tema de seguridad, con Viviana, que está aquí, hacemos juntos el programa y además aprovechó para casarse conmigo. Entonces tenemos...
¿Fue una buena decisión? Ay, qué bueno. No sé si mañana, pero hoy sí.
Pero entonces hay que ser muy cuidadosos. Hacemos muchos reportajes, pero en temas de seguridad hay que ser muy cuidadosos, hay que elegir a dónde se va, con quién se habla. Nosotros, no todos, pero nosotros como tema tenemos no entrevistar jamás narcotraficantes. Yo no entrevisto narcotraficantes, aunque sea...
No te preocupes, porque CNN sí lo hace la entrevista.
Nosotros no le damos espacio a los narcotraficantes, ni a sus comunicados, ni a sus cosas.
Javier, ahora estás con rap, pero estás trabajando, tú nunca paras, si no estás en España o en Argentina, y ¿cómo has visto que la prensa ha cambiado en lo que es informar al pueblo, en lo que es, quiero decir, el legacy media, contra ahora que es más directo al pueblo?
Bueno, en primer lugar, muchas gracias a Mercedes y a Matesla por la invitación. Lo que está haciendo hoy CPAC es muy importante para los que defendemos la libertad de expresión en sitios donde los periodistas están amenazados de muerte. Yo soy el propietario de La Derecha Diario, de UHN Plus y ahora presidente de Real America's Voice en español, lo que habla del interés de gente muy cercana a Trump de llegar a la comunidad hispana. México me preocupa tanto que cualquiera que me conozca mi historia personal sabe que tengo gente muy importante en México y no puedo volver al país. O sea, las amenazas que recibí después de que el señor Ricardo Salinas en CPAC, Argentina, me invitase públicamente a dar la batalla cultural a los zurdos, a los narcos y a la narcopresidenta Claudia Sheinbaum, hizo que yo sintiese la tentación de ir a México y empezar a informar sobre el terreno, a formar un equipo de periodistas valientes, y lo que yo no sabía es que tan pronto la presidenta Sheinbaum, por llamarle narcopresidenta, por contar las tramas de corrupción que tienen con el huachicol fiscal, por contar cómo el gobernador de Tamaulipas, ¿no?, es vanagloriado por los cárteles, ¿no?, por el cártel del Golfo, cómo los propios dirigentes del cártel del Golfo van a pedirle seguridad al propio gobernador de Tamaulipas, cómo más de 120 periodistas han sido asesinados en los últimos 20 años, y te encuentras, Mercedes, con estos asesinatos y los temas que tocamos en La Derecha Diario. Los medios tradicionales, salvo TV Azteca y algunos servidores que hay aquí sentados, no nos dan bola. Lo que yo jamás me iba a imaginar es que la narcopresidenta Claudia Sheinbaum, utilizando todo el aparato del Estado, toda la publicidad del impuesto de los mexicanos, y luego van persiguiendo a gente como Ricardo Salinas, están pagando fortunas a influencers y a medios corruptos y a comunistas como Pablo Iglesias para darnos la batalla sobre el terreno y para amenazarnos de muerte directamente. ¿Qué provocó? Que en la mañanera pasase esto, un buen día, una buena mañana, y vais a escuchar.
En diciembre de 2024, sus empresas. En diciembre de 2024, Ricardo Salinas Pliego invitó a Javier Negre, director de La Derecha Diario, a trabajar en México. Estos dos personajes, es público, han tenido interacción en X desde al menos noviembre de 2024. El 30 de enero, Javier Negre informa que abrió La Derecha Diario México en respuesta a la invitación de Ricardo Salinas Pliego. Esto fue reiterado apenas en el evento del Festival de Libertad de Ricardo Salinas Pliego, donde relató cómo el empresario lo invitó a trabajar en México y a expulsar a los zurdos. Javier Negre no está solo en Derecha Diario, tiene como socio a Fernando Cerimedo, que es argentino, estratega.
Esto fue en la mañanera, que como sabéis, es la rueda de prensa, la conferencia de prensa más viral del mundo, junto a la de nuestra querida Caroline Leavitt, en la vocera de la Casa Blanca, que ha tenido a bien introducir a La Derecha Diario en el New Media Sheet, ponerlo junto a la CNN, junto a Univisión, junto a Telemundo, para dar la batalla a los legacy media, a los zurdos. Lo que provocó este señor, la mano derecha de Claudia Sheinbaum, la narcopresidenta, es un aluvión de amenazas personales que han llegado hasta mi domicilio en Estados Unidos. O sea, los narcos me han mandado mensajes a través de abogados, a través de personas interpuestas, y los narcos responden a la narcopresidenta Sheinbaum de que si seguimos en la escalada
de publicar noticias reales, informar al pueblo mexicano y sacar a la calle a miles de jóvenes que salieron a la calle para atacar con las ideas, con el argumento y sin violencia a la narcopresidenta Sheinbaum, el aviso está claro: si vuelves a México te vamos a volar la cabeza, básicamente. Y yo lo que le digo a la narcopresidenta ahora en el Congreso de los Estados Unidos, que no le tenemos miedo, que nuestros periodistas que están sobre el terreno van a seguir dando la batalla, que han matado el gobierno criminal. Morena es un partido que se financia con dinero del narcotráfico, con dinero negro, y así lo digo abiertamente. Hay dirigentes de Morena que pagan a periodistas para que hablen mal o bien de determinados políticos, y nosotros no le tenemos miedo de la derecha diario. Y a mí solo hay una cosa que le digo: a mí me protege Dios. Y si algo me pasa, será bajo responsabilidad de la narcopresidenta Sheinbaum. Y eso es lo que tengo que decir. Sobre todo agradecer la solidaridad, Mercedes, que nos da siempre aquí, sobre todo a la Casa Blanca, por haber promovido la llegada de medios como La Derecha Diario y UHN Plus a dar la batalla a los zurdos y a evitar que medios corruptos tengan barra libre, ataquen a los agentes del ICE, que están haciendo todo lo posible por imponer la ley y el orden después de años donde Biden, donde Kamala Harris han provocado que Estados Unidos se llene de inmigrantes ilegales, muchos de los cuales tienen antecedentes criminales, y Trump hace lo correcto, porque no todos los hispanos, no todos los latinos son como los artistas estos de los Grammys, como Bad Bunny, que van de comunistas y luego tienen vida de capitalista. Y nosotros vamos a seguir dando la batalla. Muchas gracias.
Armando, te he conocido, un aplauso. Armando, te he conocido por décadas, has cubierto la Casa Blanca como reportero. ¿Cómo estás viendo, como el presidente está haciendo en este momento, en batallar a los narcotraficantes?
Voy a decir, una de las ventajas que tengo yo es de vivir y cubrir esta ciudad, ahora para varios medios. Y mi problema no es aquí, mi problema es en México. ¿Cómo evitar que haya la gran cantidad de malos entendidos que hay todos los días en las informaciones que van de un país a otro? Dios tuvo mucho sentido del humor, o al menos nos lo quiso demostrar, poniendo a México junto a Estados Unidos y después dándonos dos distintos idiomas y dos culturas para que pasemos muchas veces uno frente al otro y sigamos sin entendernos. En 250 años no nos hemos entendido. Y ahora de lo que se trata es utilizar a estos medios, a esta información, para realmente decirle a la gente lo que ocurre. Y Donald Trump es exactamente la mejor forma de hacerlo, porque el tipo de visión que hay de él aquí y en México muchas veces no se empata. La gente no lo ve igual, la gente no ve igual a Estados Unidos, pero también hay que ser muy francos. Tenemos una gran desconfianza, un pueblo del otro. Eso es lo que no he sabido nunca cómo quitarlo. Y ahora tratamos de caminar juntos y queremos caminar juntos. Y entonces cuando hay un problema tan grande como el que hay en México, y cuando vemos, por ejemplo, cómo el territorio mexicano empieza a reducirse en la capacidad del gobierno para controlarlo, y al contrario, lo que surgen son todos estos carteles y todos estos zampones que hay por todas partes y que amenazan la vida de la gente que está aquí sentada. Entonces te das cuenta de que lo que hay que hacer es realmente desmenuzar la información y dársela a la gente para que lo haga. Hay un trabajo increíble y yo se lo acabo de decir a Carlos. Carlos, yo admiro tu trabajo y la forma en la que le pones el valor a las cosas todos los días. Y el valor que pone Jorge y que pone este hombre también a todo este tipo de información, porque al final de cuentas ellos viven allá y ellos están expuestos a secuestros, asesinatos, a todo tipo de atentados. Entonces, mi reto aquí, de este lado, es cuando camino por estos pasillos, cuando entro en estos salones, cuando me acerco a la gente del poder y en el Capitolio y en el gobierno en Washington, es realmente tratar de desmenuzar y quitar lo que puede ser ruido y lo que puede ser mala interpretación, que es al final muchas veces lo que se...
Carlos, la censura, es algo que estamos viendo, que es definir, bueno, qué información va a llegar al pueblo, qué información no le llega al pueblo. Esto pasa aquí en los Estados Unidos. ¿Qué está pasando en México?
En México inventaron, no fue López Obrador, yo creo que fue, híjole, desde Mao, lo que son las mañaneras. Es borrar de una manera sistemática y vender la ficción de un México que no existe. Eso es lo que pasa. Entonces, la censura es corriendo periodistas de periódicos, no dándole dinero a otros medios porque son enemigos, bueno, ellos llaman adversarios, y y simplemente desmentir lo que la oposición dice que es una mentira. Entonces, las mañaneras es ver a México como un Shangri-La.
La mañana es la conferencia de prensa que hace Sheinbaum todos los días.
Que,
She sets the stage for the
Le señala a periodistas todos los días.
pero López Obrador tenía gracia. O sea, he was very funny guy.
Yeah.
Este es
He wasn't funny when we did CPAC Mexico,
No,
and he said that we were
no,
the
as
far-right
no.
fascist group.
No, as an entertainer.
Ah, okay.
As, like a TV person.
Right.
Claudia Sheinbaum, and where is she? She's not funny. No es simpática.
Right.
No es. And she tries to imitate López Obrador with very bad luck.
Entonces, Jorge, en lo que es la censura, como estaba preguntándole a Carlos, ¿es un problema en México? ¿Es algo que lo ven allá como lo estamos viendo acá en Estados Unidos?
Mira, hay dos problemas. Uno es la autocensura. Por intereses económicos, por intereses políticos, por intereses. Entonces hay espacios muy importantes de autocensura. Hay temas muy paradójicos de medios que no cubren determinadas actividades. Hay medios que deciden, sus directivos, que van a trabajar incluso en línea contraria de lo que escriben sus propios columnistas. Y es gravísimo porque hay un medio, sus columnistas están opinando en un sentido y las notas principales del medio van por otro ámbito. Yo creo que ese quizás es uno de los mayores problemas. Hay dos problemas también que son muy diferentes, que se relacionan con la seguridad y el narcotráfico. Una cosa es hacer periodismo en medios nacionales en la Ciudad de México y otra cosa es hacer periodismo en Sinaloa, en Tamaulipas, en Michoacán. Son temas diferentes. Nosotros hemos recibido amenazas, hemos tenido problemas y demás, pero lo podemos manejar, podemos tener seguridad y demás. Un compañero, un colega en Sinaloa, en Michoacán, en Chiapas, en Guerrero, en Tamaulipas, en Sinaloa, en Sonora, no tiene esas mismas condiciones. Entonces, se ha asesinado a muchos periodistas. Carlos señalaba a los periodistas que han sido despedidos, pero es mucho más grave los periodistas que han sido asesinados, ¿no? Y entonces ese es uno de los capítulos. Uno de los periodistas más importantes que fue asesinado en Sinaloa, Javier Valdés, lo ordenó asesinar el Minilic, el hijo de Damaso López, de un narcotraficante. Fue detenido en Estados Unidos, él se entregó a Estados Unidos, se convirtió en testigo protegido, lo dejaron en libertad, lo volvieron a apresar porque volvió a traficar con fentanilo y ayer le dieron una condena de apenas 5 años. Entonces, esos son los temas que hay que analizar. La condena fue aquí, y esos son los temas que hay que analizar.
Puedo agregar de censura. Yo escribía en un periódico nacional mi columna los martes y me corrieron. Tenía un comentario a la semana en Radio Nacional. Me corrieron. Tengo una agencia de publicidad muy grande. Me quitaron el 70% de los clientes. Eso es la censura que yo vivo. Bueno, y el canal mío de televisión, prohibido donar a Typical TV.
Perdón, en relación a lo que dice Carlos, hay que reconocer, yo escribo una columna desde 1989 y es una columna muy crítica. Tenemos un programa de televisión hace 17 años, estuve muchos años en radio. En nuestro caso no hemos tenido censura. ¿Por qué? Porque hemos tenido propietarios de medios que te apoyan. Esa es la diferencia. Si el propietario del medio te apoya y te dice, sí, puedes seguir trabajando, sí, puedes seguir haciendo tus cosas, es una diferencia brutal.
So, Javier, I want to get to you because you started in Spain and in Argentina, and it really is, an independent media organization, not your traditional media outlet, very much driven from a digital standpoint. How are you viewing this in these other countries that you've been in? How do you view them all differently, especially when it comes to how you're seeing this play out, the social media piece of this play out in the U.S. and also in Mexico?
Bueno, básicamente yo vengo de los medios tradicionales, era el responsable de estrategia visual del grupo de comunicación más grande de España, Unidad Editorial. Por presiones del gobierno y por denunciar toda la corrupción del presidente socialista español me expulsaron de la empresa y yo me quedé sin nada y de repente pidiendo ayuda a Dios y pidiendo ayuda a mis seguidores me expulsaron de todas las televisiones, pero decidí, cuando Trump estaba siendo muerto civilmente aquí hace 5 años, desde el salón de mi casa, decir voy a montar un canal de YouTube y a buscarme la vida. Fue tal el aluvión de seguidores que me vio obligado a abrir en más países, me fui a Argentina a apoyar al presidente Milei y a dar la batalla a los medios corrompidos. Y la suerte que tenemos nosotros, al hilo de tu pregunta, es que nosotros tenemos una estructura low cost. Nosotros estamos liderando en México el mercado en redes sociales con 3 periodistas, con los periodistas más jóvenes, más talentosos que tiene México. Cualquiera que vea la red de La Derecha Diario lo puede ver. Y lo curioso que quiere hacer a Sheinbaum es, igual que Pedro Sánchez, el presidente socialista español, quiere prohibirnos, judicializarnos y decir que los menores de 16 años no pueden acceder a las redes sociales en Twitter, quiere cerrar Twitter, X, quiere cerrar Meta. O sea, lo que quiere controlar es como el algoritmo y como el crecimiento nuestro es tan brutal entre la gente joven, la nueva ola de derecha que ha llegado a América Latina con Milei, que ha llegado con Trump, con toda la red de podcasters, youtubers que le hicieron a Trump ganar las elecciones gracias al fantástico trabajo de Alex Brucevic y de gente como Levitt, que vieron que el New York Times y el Washington Post eran grandes medios, pero sin credibilidad en el público, y estos chicos, desde una casa en Wisconsin y con muy pocos recursos, con una tarjeta de internet, eran capaces de viralizar contenido a millones de personas, porque la gente en su casa, tú lo puedes mentir varias veces, como hace el presidente de mi país español, le puedes contar la mentira sobre sus escándalos de corrupción, pero al final la gente que tiene criterio se da cuenta y va a YouTube y va a las redes sociales a informarse. ¿Qué están haciendo los presidentes representados por George Soros, por Alex Soros, por el Foro de Sao Paulo y por dinero del narcotráfico? Pues lo que están haciendo es tratar de legislar el acceso a redes sociales de la gente joven, porque saben que la llegada de la nueva ola va a llegar y que esa gente joven en el apartado americano ve a Benny Johnson, ve a Ben Shapiro, ve a un montón de amigos a los que CPAC ha dado altavoz, y en el lado hispano están viendo La Derecha Diario, están viendo UHN+. Nosotros está el aluvión de la nueva ola de derechas que ha llegado a América con tanta fuerza que nosotros, cuando llegamos a un país, movemos el tablero político. En Bolivia apoyamos a un tipo que era desconocido, ahora es presidente de Bolivia, se llama Rodrigo Paz. En Honduras apoyamos a Tito Fura. En Argentina fuimos el único medio que apoyó a Milei teniendo 4 voluntarios. Y lo mejor de todo, que yo como empresario he tomado estas estructuras y hemos promovido el nacimiento de periodistas como Vito Quiles, que con un micrófono son capaces de provocar que comunistas como Pablo Iglesias les traten de agredir. Y nosotros, cuanto más nos amenazan, cuanto peor habla la narcopresidenta Sheinbaum de nosotros, más crecemos en México. Porque hay una cosa que tengo clara: amo México. Lo que no puede ser normal, que la última vez que estuve tenga que ir escoltado para dar una conferencia 2 horas y volverme a Estados Unidos. Y que mis chicos jóvenes que hay allí te reporten diariamente que los quieren matar y tengan que vivir en domicilios donde ni siquiera están registrados. Y le digo un mensaje a la narcopresidenta Sheinbaum. Ella ha intentado cerrar ya La Derecha Diario presionando a X, presionando a Meta. Y me sacaron el otro día que nuestras cuentas de México están fuera del país. Claro, pues somos mucho más listos que ella. No contratamos a boludos. Nosotros tenemos nuestros representantes legales que sabemos que en México vamos a seguir operando y que no queremos dinero de la narcopolítica, porque la mayoría de la gente que se ha acercado a financiar La Derecha Diario son abogados de narcotraficantes, gente vinculada a Morena para atacar a Morena. Y también tenéis que saber que a veces ves en los medios cómo matan a influencers que son influencers de los cárteles. Es decir, tú sabrás la historia, es decir, que hay periodistas que han hecho una valiente labor de investigación y lo matan después de darle varios avisos, pero que ahora los cárteles y la narcopresidenta Sheinbaum están contratando influencers para difamarme a mí, para difamar a La Derecha Diario, para difamar a estos valientes periodistas que llevan mucho más tiempo que yo en México y que merecen sin duda todo mi respeto. Pero ahora la guerra es tecnológica y con un teléfono móvil cualquiera de las personas que estáis aquí sois más valiosos que cualquier panelista, columnista del Washington Post y de los medios tradicionales de México, a los que ya no cree nadie porque todo está viciado con dinero corrupto del narcotráfico y del Estado, que luego persiguen a Ricardo Salinas cuando el dinero de sus impuestos va a pagar a Pablo Iglesias, al comunista, para poner una gran sede en Ciudad de México, porque él se ha vendido como el antídoto a La Derecha Diario. Y lo que le digo a Pablo Iglesias, a todos estos gobernadores que le están pagando, que nosotros vamos a seguir publicando sus cuentas y vamos a seguir persiguiendo a los hijos de AMLO cada vez que van a tiendas, a Loro Piana, a Louis Vuitton, a comprarse los bolsos que ninguno de estos señores podemos regalar a nuestras mujeres y novias.
Bravo. Armando, me están diciendo que I have to stop, but I want you to have the last word because it really is the death of the legacy media. La prensa tradicional se está muriendo cada día porque las personas, los ciudadanos no creen en la prensa. ¿Cómo eso es tu observación también?
Claro, no, lo veo igual. Y a mí me parece que los esfuerzos independientes que estamos viendo son solamente la reacción natural a toda esta apabullante fuerza del gobierno mexicano que está tratando simple y sencillamente de proteger sus nexos con el narcotráfico. Es gente que está podrida, es gente que está apestada por esta unión con el narcotráfico y que nos ve a nosotros como enemigos porque nosotros lo podemos decir y le podemos decir a la gente y adquirimos credibilidad y la gente entonces escucha lo que decimos. Entonces, eso es para ellos, no, para ellos somos peligrosos, somos enemigos muy peligrosos porque podemos cambiar la forma en la que lo hacen. El gobierno de México está anclado en las dádivas que le da a la gente para que la gente no escuche. Y entonces, con estas mañaneras, lo que hacen es sembrar el tipo de información que va a quedar. Y muchos de los medios lo único que hacen es seguir todo esto. Si tú llegas a las mañaneras solas, tendrían menos del 3% de rating. Pero lo que pasa es que los medios lo usan, lo ven y lo repiten, y entonces se convierte en la gran...
Donde no nos invitan a la mañanera, nos censuran,
No, of course not.
no dejan entrar.
I will say Javier will know this is true. President Trump is the best at dominating the media news cycle. That is for sure, and Caroline Leavitt does an incredible job as a press secretary. Thank you, gracias a todos.
Gracias.
Esta es
Gracias.
uno de mis favoritos paneles porque es la prensa y esto y de comunicaciones. Esto es lo que a mí me gusta.
Gracias, Mercedes.
Shopping center.
Can you let me know? I can fly on Monday. Okay. Are we closing up? Okay. Just, yeah, no, read it out.
To conclude, please welcome CPAC Senior Fellow Mercedes Schlapp and Juan Iván Peña Neder, President of México Republicano.
All right, everyone. Ya estamos concluyendo hoy. ¿Qué le pareció? I want to get comments. What do you think? Yes? No? I love Make Mexico Safe Again. I love make Mexico Safe again. Bueno, you go first.
Thank you very much for this support. Muchísimas gracias por este esfuerzo. A toda la gente que vino de México, les queremos decir que sabemos que tenemos que regresar a México a una realidad muy compleja. Gracias a las figuras políticas que nos acompañaron. Beatriz, Francisco, muchas gracias por haber estado con nosotros. Se los agradecimos sentidamente. A todos los que participaron, decirles que seguramente esto está ayudando a recambiar la realidad y que tenemos un compromiso por venir con CPAC, con México y con la enorme puerta que el presidente Trump está abriendo desde los Estados Unidos para que el hemisferio cambie. Merci, muchas gracias.
Bueno, muchas gracias a usted, gracias de verdad en tener esta importancia alianza. Yo creo que es bien importante para nosotros. Rosy, thank you, porque Rosy es la que siempre une, hablando de la persona que une a todo el mundo, es Rosy, for sure, y su querido esposo Alejandro también, gracias. Y quiero decir a all our CPAC staff, thank you so much for putting this together. You guys are amazing. But I want to thank you all here, because you all are going to take this information and know that there's a lot of work to be done, that the work doesn't end here, it starts today. We have a lot to work on, to get done, to help. Look, I don't want to give up on Mexico, okay? My family, I went with Matt and one of my daughters, and we went to the Basilica where Our Lady of Guadalupe is, and we prayed very much to Our Lady, and we consecrated CPAC to Our Lady of Guadalupe. So she protects our CPAC, our organization, she protects our family, she protects our business. It's very important for us, and we were inspired by the girls we went to go visit at Chalco. So we went to go see the girls at Chalco, which is about 4,000 girls, where the Sisters of Mary take care of these girls who are in poverty, and many of them are human trafficking victims. And so for us, it's very personal. So we want Mexico to succeed. We want the Mexican people to live in a free and prosperous and safe nation. And so we at CPAC are committed to working closely with you all and your organization and keep building the coalition. Our goal is to build the coalition so that we can see change in Mexico. We are looking to do a CPAC Latin America. I will keep you posted on that. But I invite you all to come to CPAC USA. That's in Dallas, Texas, March 25th through the 28th, CPAC USA, el 25 de marzo hasta el 28 de marzo en Dallas, Texas. Empezamos con una cumbre internacional donde vienen representantes y líderes de yo no sé cuántos países ya, como 30 países que vienen a estar con nosotros, de Asia, de Europa, de Latinoamérica. We are a organization that we will keep growing. We are not stopping. We are not slowing down. We are going to keep fighting for freedom. We are going to keep fighting for prosperity. We're going to make sure that it's not just America first, that it's Mexico first, and Argentina first, and Italy first, that the people can feel that they can live in a safe country with strong leaders that stand up for our values of faith and family and country. And that is our goal and our mission here at CPAC. So you're part of the CPAC family. Stay connected with us at cpac.org. Be involved. Tenemos CPAC Latino también. Hacemos mucho trabajo aquí en los Estados Unidos para ganar las elecciones. So nosotros no paramos. Aquí trabajamos todos los días, 24 horas al día. So, gracias a todos por venir y que Dios los bendiga.
Muchísimas
¡Viva
gracias.
México! ¡Viva los Estados Unidos!
Muchas gracias.
How you doing? Great to see you. Fine, how are you? Sí. Oh, great. Okay. I don't know, I have to. Tiene que ser con Ernesto. I need a...
Perfecto. No, yo me encargo.
Hi, Paula. How are you?